Okay, good morning, everybody. Could call the meeting to order, please. Okay, we've got apologies this morning from Councillor Lee and from Councillor Benny. We've got Councillor Rennie joining us online. Do we have any declarations of interest for the items on the agenda? Councillor McLaughlin. Sorry.
Vice Chair, just to declare an interest in item 13, I believe, the motion from the council leader on the Alloa Business Improvement District.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry,
Councillor Quinn.
perhaps on the same basis, I just remind the council that I am a board member of the Alloa First Limited, so when that conversation comes round, I don't think there's a conflict of interest here, so I'm just mentioning that in case it slipped anyone's mind.
Okay, thanks. And apologies, I've just been reminded. I'm supposed to be in the protocol before we even get to that point, so we'll go through that now. All visitors must sign into the visitor book at the entrance to Kilncraigs. This includes council staff from other buildings. There is no planned fire evacuation drill or alarm test today. If the fire alarm is activated during your visit, you must exit the building immediately. Council officers will direct you to the nearest fire exit and will escort visitors to the building fire assembly point beside the Silver Man at the top of Parliament Walk. Kilncraig staff should report to their floor's assembly point. You should remain at your assembly point until directed to reoccupy the building and only re-enter once the fire marshal has advised it is safe to do so. Please do not attempt to leave the site by vehicle until it's clear to do so by the fire marshal to ensure that access routes are kept clear for emergency vehicles. Please note this is a public meeting and that members of the public may be in attendance. The meeting will be recorded by the clerk and published online for public viewing. The taking of photographs, including screenshots, audio or video recordings, are not permitted during meetings unless with express permission of the convener. Can members attending virtually activate cameras where possible to enable you to join by video, and all attendees mute their microphones when not speaking. Please do not come in during items unless I invite you to do so. If members attending virtually wish to speak at any point, indicate by clicking on the raise your hand button. Members in the chambers should also raise their hand and I will bring in at the appropriate time. Members have not been able to access all papers for the meeting, please indicate. Thank you, and we'll hear each of the items set in the agenda. I'll invite the officer to present the papers. Members will then have the opportunity to ask questions before we proceed to debate and decision. And could be opportune, could we switch off any mobile phones or devices we have that are likely to go off during the course of the meeting. Okay, so item 3 on the agenda is minutes of the meeting from Clackmannanshire Council on the 28th of November. I'll go through them page by page, just indicate if there's an issue. Page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14. Okay, we're happy to approve the minutes? Okay. Item 4 is the committee recommendations referred to council. And Nikki is going to take us through that paper next.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, councillors. The purpose of this paper is to seek council approval of recommendations submitted to the Audit and Scrutiny Committee on the 12th of December. The recommendations relate to 2 reports. Firstly, the annual report of the Chief Social Work Officer for 2023-24, and secondly, the annual Audit and Scrutiny Committee report follow-up. The first of these reports is available on the council's website, and due to the nature of the recommendation to council to comment on, challenge and approve the second report, this report is appended to this summary report for ease of review and potential comment. I'm happy to take any questions on the paper.
Thanks, Nikki. Do we have any questions? Questions? Councillor Forson to move? Right, that's quick. Councillor Lindsay? Anybody wish to debate the paper? Are we happy to approve? Okay. Item 5 is a question to the convener in relation to Greenfield House submitted by Councillor Craig Holden. I think you were all issued on electronically last night what the response to that question is, and I think there may be paper copies in the chamber this morning as well. If you don't mind, I'm going to go through it. I appreciate you've got it in front of you, but there are others in the room who haven't, and it is a public meeting, so we should have it in public record. So the question from Councillor Holden is that can the convener provide council with an update on the current condition of planned future use of Greenfield House? Officers have advised that a condition report commissioned during the summer of 24 has reported a range of works required to bring Greenfield House back to a usable state. As members may be aware, Greenfield House has lain unused for the past 8 years, with little works having been progressed by the previous private owner, resulting in water ingress, damage and vandalism, with the council acquiring the asset back in 2021. The condition report refers to in respect of the building's fabric has been in poor condition overall, with significant water ingress which has led to a failure of internal linings and internal floor structures. This damage, alongside a significant period being vacant, has seen the development of internal dry rot, which has led to a failure of both internal finishes and internal floor structure. The 1987 extension to the rear, the structure is generally in fair condition, however the internal areas are falling into poor condition. There is now a requirement for full renewal of all internal finishes and the replacement of all window units. The council has secured the site and embarked on a programme of works to have the property wind and watertight by March or April for this year, as part of a multi-phase regeneration programme linked to the City Region deal. Following this first phase of bringing the house back to a state of wind and watertight, the second phase, which will run throughout 25-26, will see addressed the issues with damp, wet and dry rot. These two phases represent £1 million capital investment by the council. Phases 3 onwards will seek to develop a centre for Clackmannanshire to provide a beacon to celebrate the rich cultural heritage of the council and attract visitors from far and wide. This work will be supported by over £6 million of City Region deal investment monies for digital innovation, cultural heritage and tourism, with dialogue underway with a number of other funding bodies in support of this project. Again, members may recall the report to Council in March 24, which outlined this work under the banner of Alloa Innovation Campus, which sees Greenfield as a central anchor for City Region deal investment work, alongside the University of Stirling and their developments within Scotland's International Environment Centre and Intergenerational Living Innovation Hub. Additionally, the University of Stirling is in the final stages of developing a detailed proposition for both of those. The University is committed to this activity being based in Alloa. The development work will be completed by the end of February this year. In addition, a number of early stage discussions are underway with key partners that may result in some of their activities being reallocated to Alloa. If this proceeds, it would represent significant additional activity and investment leveraged on the City Deal project. It's anticipated that some of this activity would be based at the Greenfield House site, subject to availability. So that's the written response to the question, Councillor Holden. Understanding orders, you've been entitled to up to 2 supplementary questions, looking for further clarity on those issues. Just for the purposes of everybody else, that doesn't open it up to questions for anybody else that can't lead to debate in the chamber. It's simply for further clarification for yourself.
Thanks, Convener. First of all, can I just thank you for the comprehensive response to the question. This is the first time I've received a written response. Obviously, it was previously questions to the promise, but it's the first time I've received such a comprehensive written response, so I'm grateful for that. My questions, I've got 2 questions for you. And first, can the convener provide us with further information on the ongoing status of the City Deal and the ongoing dialogue with other funding bodies referred to in the response provided?
So you'll appreciate from the answer you got, and I appreciate that you're grateful for it. It came from officers. And I'm going to ask Kevin if he can come up and respond to your question.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. In regards to your supplementary questions, there's ongoing dialogue with our colleagues at the University of Stirling round about the ILIH and SIEC. There's been ongoing conversations between the Chief and key Chief Officers at the University as well about bringing this together as part of that Alloa Innovation Campus, referring back to that report in March last year, looking to take forward that work. So that is progressing well at this stage in terms of the City Region deal. We have a plan that has been realigned in terms of its phasing. In terms of the City Region deal, that would have been covered in terms of the details within the joint committee reports that have went forward. So that is progressing well at this stage. We are having ongoing conversations with the university in terms of taking that work forward. With regards to the second point, sorry.
Other funding bodies.
The other funding bodies. So we've started engagement with Historic Environment Scotland and the National Lottery Heritage Fund. The Historic Environment Scotland have asked us to progress to the next stage of that expression of interest, but both parties are interested in those proposals that we have going forward, particularly linked the cultural heritage and tourism element of the project, and we are also looking to explore private investment linked to that wider investment strategy work that the council has been progressing as well.
Thank you. I was just going to add a further comment, Councillor, if that's okay. We are also working closely with the University of Stirling around the investment strategy, because obviously they've got quite a lot of resource and reach in that area. And whilst I can't share details in public, there are some very promising potential investments coming from the private sector that are being looked at just now in regards to this as well. So we're very actively focused on that investment strategy piece as a partnership.
Do you have a second question, Councillor Holden?
Is it the intention of the council to provide us with regular updates with regards to the status of Greenfield and the funding that we've obviously mentioned as well?
I think you give me that assurance that that is the plan, is to bring regular updates.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, item 6 is the housing revenue account budget, and it's Molly's going to take us through.
Been thrown a curveball this morning, didn't expect this. Some folk might like sitting down. So, morning, councillors, and thank you, Chair, for inviting me over for the housing revenue account budget for 25-26, the capital budget 25-26, and consideration also included within the report this morning about the revised rent structure. I must start off with a couple of quick apologies. It was only on final glance last night that I noticed that there was a couple of minor issues in the paper. So in Appendix 2, we'd left in to rename one of the capital projects as Tenant Improvement Fund from MCB, which happily references rename. So obviously it's a typo, it should have been removed. Obviously, Alloa Academy is looking for a new principal teacher, so we put in a new mathematical equation in Appendix 8 relating to a sum which is incorrect. It should actually be £9.59 rather than £10.71 less £10.71 equaling £10.71, so apologies for that. In Appendix 7, we believe we've uploaded the incorrect appendix, but we will circulate that one around members. However, Table 10 and at 10.3 does emphasise the point in relation to the borrowing. So apologies for that on our final reading. So this year has been quite a significant year for the housing service. We've seen our SHQS performance increase significantly. We're now at 93.54% from a Scottish average of 77% compliance with Scottish Housing Quality Standard. We've seen a significant reduction in our current rent arrears, which is now significantly below the Scottish average at 2.27%, with the Scottish average sitting at over 6%. 92% of tenants are satisfied with the house when they move in, which is great, but 99% are happy with the standard of the house, which means that we're still not getting it right for everybody, which is probably a good thing, because there's always work to be done and always improvements to be made. And in terms of improvements, I think one of the things that we've actioned over the last year and it's really helped the service move forward is the monthly performance meetings that are held with councillors, the CTRF and the trade union representatives, where we look at an area and deep dive into that area of business. So this week and tomorrow we're looking at the investment strategy in terms of new build homes with Kingdom Housing Association for elected members, and even this afternoon we've got a session with CTRF with the Scottish Government and the Scottish Housing Network, deep diving into local government finances. So we're obviously open, transparent, keen to learn, keen to make improvements and move forward. So it's on that basis that part of the proposal in the report in terms of the replacement rent structure There's been a constant feedback for the council for a number of years that tenants have made continual complaint about the cost of rent for the particularly bedroom sizes or properties which have got smaller bedroom sizes. And obviously, as the paper acknowledges today, that if council approves the revised rental strategy, that actually 72% of our tenants would pay less in the new structure compared if the rent structure carried on with the proposed increase. So obviously the paper recommends a 10% rise in the base rental level. Clearly rental rises, as the paper indicates, have been below inflation for a number of years. Benefits have been and wages have been rising faster, and perhaps some of the inflation measures that we've perhaps been relying on perhaps need to be refined and reflected upon in terms of what's actually driving the costs within the sector. We're obviously delighted that TP engagement has become right to the fore of the organisation, and it's happened that we've managed to receive a record number of responses to the consultation, over 500 this time, which when you reflect back when I stood over there in 2019 when we'd only got something like a handful of responses online, which demonstrates the work that we're doing, especially Callum, who joins us at the back of the room today. So we've got a real commitment to tenant participation. Obviously, Council just agreed a new tenant participation strategy. Callum's working on the ground to look at new TPU RTOs being set up, and obviously in the paper it's coming next. There's commitment going forward about a potential establishment of a tenant participation board to really emphasise and highlight that real commitment to tenant engagement. And obviously the Federation have provided comments on the paper. They've been reflected and have been circulated to all members as part of the presentation and the briefing sessions. And obviously we see that as a real opportunity for us. The Federation are perhaps in disagreement with us because it's a real point of actual making sure that we can really engage with tenants, because for a number of years, if you go back to the early 2000s, where we had a lot of tenant engagement, there was a lot of people interested about improving the standards. So this could be the cusp to actually making sure that tenants really want to come and work with us in terms of really analysing the work we've got to do on the stock and analysing what sort of rent level going forward that's going to require. So that we see this in terms of a real opportunity. Obviously, just in terms of the briefing sessions, a big thanks for all those members who took part and then subsequently got in touch and asked for additional information. And hopefully you found that additional information helpful in terms of your thinking for this morning. So on that basis, clearly I've presented the report. I won't go through the numerous recommendations, but obviously happy to take any further questions.
Okay, thanks, Murray. Do we have any questions? Councillor Quinn?
Thanks, Convener. My first one is page 42, section 4.1, and it's the part of the last sentence. Just want a bit of clarification exactly on what's being hinted at here, in a way, influencing as to whether the council should remain as a social landlord. What do we read into that?
So if we go back to the early 2000s, as we know from the then Labour government, there was a question was posed to the sector as to whether councils should remain as social landlords, and councils were offered at that stage a financial incentive to transfer their stock to RSLs or ask the tenants whether they should leave the council as a social landlord. At that stage, a number of councils undertook assessments of their stock in terms of the investment that was going to be required. Some councils made the decision based on that information that they would go to public ballot and ask their tenants as to whether they should remain with the local authority at that stage. That's what I was referencing earlier. That sort of really drove at those early days real engagement from the tenants in terms of coming forward as to whether they wanted to remain with the council. At that stage in 2004-ish, Jane might be able to keep me right, the Adamson's work, the stock condition survey, indicated to council that based on significant rent increases, which was set at RPI plus 2% for a number of years, the council could retain its stock. And obviously over and above that, the council gave a commitment to reaching the Clack standard, which was a standard even above the Scottish Housing Quality Standard. But the reference there in terms of the paragraph is, and allowing for some of the commentary from the CTRF, is we've probably reached that stage again where the investment now required in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of maintaining our stock going forward, and the question over the rent affordability, it's really getting it's putting some of that back to the nub of the debate in terms of what tenants are happy with, in terms of what sort of level of debt are you comfortable with, what sort of standard are you willing to accept, what sort of investment are you willing to be happy to pay for that sort of rent. So it's really about that sort of debate, and that we think, and that's why we're saying potentially the CPRF comments is an opportunity, because that's the type of discussion we want to get in with tenants. We want to get into the real nub in that debate, because that's what we want. It's this service, we're here as the custodians, it's tenants' service. That's the debate and discussion that we want to have with them.
So are you saying, do we still have the option as a council to opt to go down that road, the option to opt?
I believe the Treasury removed the incentive some time ago, but the options always remained. As part of the 2001 Act, it's enshrined within the legislation. It was a precursor to the what then came after it in terms of the community transfer initiative. So the 2001 Act still gives the tenants the ability to ask for a vote and to move to another landlord should they wish to do so.
It gives the tenants the right to ask for a vote. Does it give the council a right to ask the tenants?
I'd probably have to come back to you on the specific legalities of it's been a while since somebody's asked me that question. I'll come back to you, Councillor Coyne, on the specifics.
That's fine, thanks, Murray. I'm sure it's not an immediate answer. Let's hope so. Next one, convener, if I may, is on page 43, and it's 4.6. It's talking about the fact that the financial modelling is not aligned with the asset management strategy and the stock condition survey. I just wondered what the consequences of that misalignment were or are. So
in terms of the council agreed as part of, I was looking this up the other day, I think it was 2018, 2019, we revised our sort of life cycle investment strategy. So this sort of set the tone in terms of the number of years that we would wait before replacing sort of bathrooms, kitchens. So at that stage, the council made a decision, for example, to change the life cycle replacement of kitchens from 15 years to 20 years. So in terms of what that really references is, the further out we go in terms of our planning, in terms of the capital programme, the further misalignment we do have in terms of some of that dates and reference in terms of when specific assets are due for replacement. In terms of the plan in front of councillors this morning, in terms of Appendix 2, obviously some of that, we've got that mapped out because obviously it's linked with term contracts. So, for example, we know that next year, on the future years, the next settlement that we're going to in terms of roof replacement is Clackmannan, because those roofs are reaching their life cycle replacement.
So it's just a question of tweaking the spreadsheet to agree with the real world?
Yes.
Thanks. If I may continue, I know there's another councillor wanting to put their hand up. Page 44. Well, it seems that, no, there it is there. Yes. This is a bit mean, but the maths in 4.10 at the bottom, that the total rise in the period has been achieved by simply adding up the elements in the column. That's not actually mathematically correct. This is a cumulative process, so just making the point, it doesn't matter so much here because the results come out at 20.12, 30.2 and 30.93, so not hugely different. But in a different scenario, it could be very significant. Do you agree?
Yes, and Mr. Bruce, when the new principal teacher of our academy starts, we make sure that he gives us some sufficient lessons in this area.
I'll concede to Councillor Rennie for a moment, just give a chance.
Okay, thanks. Actually, I've got Councillor McTaggart first to before the Councillor Rennie.
Thanks, Chair. I just need clarity around CTRF's comments. I wonder if you can tell us how many tenants were involved in the process of reaching that decision regarding their opinion on the paper. And can you tell me how often they consult with tenants on matters around the housing revenue account? Thanks, Murray.
As we understand that, although I might be incorrect, so my understanding is there's one current council tenant on their management committee as it presently stands. There's other tenants from other RSLs within their committee. We understand that the statement has come from the committee. In terms of their engagement, that's the work which Callum's trying to obviously take forward. So CTRF should be the umbrella organisation which feeds from the other RTOs within the area. And obviously the work that Callum's trying to do in terms of is trying to develop further RTOs within the area that would then feed back into the CTRF.
Just on the back of that, so technically no tenant consultation took place regarding the feeling, the rent increase, the rent restructure, etc. You mentioned 2004, and I might remember it. Obviously, I was involved in CTRF for a number of years, and when there was a significant change about to happen, it was a blanket consultation. That I would say is a prudent way to deal with it. So that didn't happen this time, I'm assuming.
Not to our full understanding, but obviously we could ask CTRF further if your members would like on that basis, and then circulate some details. But what I would say is we've done a lot of work over the years in terms of trying to increase our sample size. I mean, to get over 500, over 10% sample size is pretty good for a rent consultation. And obviously that lends itself in terms of our wider survey of tenants, which is carried out independently by an independent company, which obviously surveys around 1,000 tenants. So 20% sample size, which has brought back the similar evidence in terms of the value for money, in terms of how tenants feel about the service and the standard of the work they get. So if you want to lay in weight, that's where you probably lend your weight, is where you've got the significant sample size responses.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rennie?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for that, Murray. That was really helpful. Just a couple of questions, which apologies, I didn't manage to get to the briefing, so there may be things that have already been answered, so apologies for that in advance. But I'm just wondering why we asked tenants on 3 different levels that all 3 were relatively high in terms of 9.5%, 10% and 10.5%, not given a different option or an open option within that survey. And also, as well as that, we said to afford our current financial business plan for the next 5 years, we require a minimum of 10%. So it felt to me like almost a sort of question. It was a bit of a leading question, and I'm wondering why in our consultation we're not leaving it to a bit more openness with tenants to be able to give their responses.
Thanks, Councillor Rennie. In terms of the first question, that's probably the approach in terms of the options in terms of giving a range. It's probably the approach that most RSLs and councils will take. So if we circulated around details of other consultations from other RSLs, other councils, you would see that sort of range. So for example, I think Fife Council, it's a range between 6 and 8%. Falkirk Council, it was a range between 8 to 9.5%. So that is the approach that's generally taken. And obviously, at the lower end is the indication of, in terms of it's stated within there, that we would have to look at changes to the capital programme or cuts to investment or tweaks or savings provided into the HRA. And obviously the comment around the 10% is when you look at some of the assumed rent increases that council had previously had noted in terms of CPI plus 1%, that you can actually tell that even over the short to medium term, that actually our CFCR is dropping back significantly to the point where there is a real risk that potentially that we might reach a point where our income does not meet the expenditure. That's not a legally viable position that the council can atone to or approve. And similarly, we have put in the report in terms of the duties that Lindsay has as Section 85 officer in terms of mitigation around that, because we have got graphs in the report where, at least by year 10, in terms of some of the energy efficiency works, we are looking at a sort of deficit coming forward. So that's why, in terms of the sort of 10%, it was looking at in terms of making sure that the business case and the financial plan was viable over the short to medium term. The report does reference mitigations that allow Lindsay in her other duties to basically say, right, Murray, what is the service looking to do? So we are looking in terms of those assumed rent rises. We're looking at our stock condition survey, so there will be work during the course of the year looking at that to try and make sure that the service is viable going forward.
Just a kind of follow-up, and you've led me into it beautifully in terms of what I was going to ask next in terms of the capital programme. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a specific paper, but I know there was a paper in the past that we looked at in terms of the capital programme over a number of years. You know, I think it was about 17 years in terms of what money would be required to meet that and the borrowing that would be required to meet that capital programme. And I'm just wondering, like, has there been a difference or a move forward or more added since then? Because we now seem to be, I don't remember a 10% increase being built in at that time. So I'm just wondering if there's been change since then.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. And yes, obviously we have been working with finance. So last year's models were brought forward, obviously with the consultant who obviously set up the financial plan, and obviously the comments in the question earlier from Councillor Coyne was around that aspect about the financial modelling. So the service done a lot of work with Claire, our accountant, and obviously Lindsay and Nicola take some of that work forward. Clearly, we obviously borrow jointly together with Council. So the model now has been updated with all of our up-to-date borrowing and loan information that's available, which perhaps wasn't readily available to the consultant last year. So that's all been updated within this modelling. So you are correct, there is a change from last year of what we were indicating or signalling, but it's based on the information that's available today.
Thank you. And just one follow-up, just based on Councillor McTaggart's question about the Tenants and Residents Federation. If there wasn't consultation, I'm sure we still respect the Tenants and Residents Federation for their expertise and their knowledge about what's out there for people who are renting properties. So just asking that question, if we give we give attention to in terms of their expertise rather than just their consultation.
Yeah, yes, absolutely, Councillor Rennie, and that's why obviously they're welcome to join us on these monthly performance sessions. They are our actual formal registered body, and obviously that's the work that we're doing with Callum to really enrich the work that the CTRF have carried on. They've sort of carried the flame for us for a number of years, so absolutely. And that's why this afternoon we're welcome into the session that we're having with the Scottish Government. So yeah, we fully welcome and accept the work that CTRF do for us, especially June the Chair, who goes above and beyond and is always circulating papers to some of us, some of which we don't even see as officers, that June somehow gets access to.
Much appreciated, Murray, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Holden.
Thanks. Murray, I'm just going to ask you this question because it's a follow-up from really what Councillor Coyne asked. I think it's important that we make it clear. Have you at any point in the last 12 months or at any preceding point received any political indication of a willingness to entertain the prospect of stock transfer?
No.
Sorry, the second question is really around the financial modelling. You've spoken a bit about it. I'm not going to go into detail because I'm not clever enough to go into detail, to be frank with you. But anyway, when I'm looking at what we're seeing in terms of the comparison of recent rent and wage increases, is it the council's fault that we find ourselves in a position here where we're having to increase the rent by 10%? And you know why I'm asking it, because I'm referring it to the table in 4.10, where we've got rent increases. Have we played fast and loose with the rents?
As indicated last year, clearly external factors are coming significantly into play. So the wage, especially the wage increases, that's our biggest, as we know from the council in terms of our staffing, that's our biggest resource in terms of the cost basis. So when those costs have been rising dramatically faster than the rents, that's put real pressure on our costs. It's made our surplus reduce over time. So if you carry that model forward, whether cumulatively or addition like we've done, then you would reach a point where you would wipe out that surplus. So there's external pressure from there. There is a real question, obviously, in terms of there's engagement with the trade unions, and there's engagement, obviously, via COSLA in terms of the wage increase. But it's perhaps something that I think Lindsay had started to notify during the course of her work this year, in terms of the papers for COSLA leaders. They start to notify through some of those papers in terms of the impact some of these wage increases are having on the HRA specifically. But similarly, as I alluded to earlier, in terms of the inflation rises, the CPI basket obviously includes a whole host, the cost of bread, Spotify downloads, etc. But we, as a service, we're not downloading Spotify downloads, etc. You know, thankfully, chief executives. What is happening though, what's on the ground, is we're seeing significant rises in some of the cost of materials. Jim Laird can tell you in terms of some of the actual specifics. But some of the products that we've been using for some of our properties have been rising 10, 20%, 24 and whatever in terms of some of that cost. And it's really putting a real strain on some of the programmes in terms of investment.
Okay, thanks, Karina. I just want to ask a couple of quick questions. I'm going to kind of just carry on from that one. No, I understand. I mean, the paper clearly indicates in section 4.5 you've got Brexit, you've got Ukraine. We've got obviously the supply chain and construction industry. I mean, everybody could testify to that. I mean, I think actually, I mean, in my personal experience, I've seen prices increase by 100%. It's not unusual. You know, you basically have to pay double for what you had to pay before. As somebody that's involved in a lot of construction, it's obviously quite costly for us, you know. But you've been very diplomatic in terms of your answer there. But I do think there is an important point, and I'm trying to get you to say it because I think the councils need to be aware of it, and I think I need to be reminded of it as well on occasion. And the point I'm making, and I will get to a question on this one, is that we've got, if you look at the pattern of rent increases. Now, before we go into that, I'll just remind council in terms of this question, because I do remember 2004, I remember it well. I remember the process that we went through and the massive increase that we had, and the political willingness the administration then and all the other councillors to say, right, enough's enough. The stock retention is so important that we have to keep it. We have to keep our stock, therefore we're going to bite the bullet on this one. 4.10, 2.2%, 2.2%, 1.5%, 0%, 3.1%, 3%, 6.7%. Notwithstanding the pressures that we were facing, because we understood the pressures that the public were facing in terms of cost, COVID had impacted, all the rest of it, all these other things. You know, and all of the financial pressures, economic pressures on everybody. But see, when we do that, do you not agree that when councils fluctuate up and down like that, it causes us this type of problem, does it not? We'd be better just depoliticising the whole, because that is very unusual. And I'm not going to castigate anybody for it, but the Conservative Party reintroduced this, you see, for a long period where there was no debate around. There was general consensus based upon the financial models being put up.
Councillor Holden,
when we depart from that,
can we get to the question?
When we depart from that, I was just about to go there, to be honest. When we depart from that, does that not put pressure on us to come back with 10% proposed increases, and then everybody's screaming blue month?
The simplest answer would be yes. But to qualify that, what I would say is, in theory, the council approved a new business plan in 2018-19. I was elsewhere within the organisation at that stage, and obviously, when I came back into the service, we were largely working on that business plan at the stage when I presented the report in 2019 before COVID. Clearly, COVID, the reasons were set out in the report at COVID in terms of where we were. There was basically no capital programme effectively that year, so that report is still available for members to consider. I do take the point, yes, that if you did flatten some of these out over time, it might be much more consumable for the tenants and residents. And potentially alluding to the work where I'm suggesting where we've got a real opportunity going forward, engaging with the tenants, looking at the rental structure going forward. Is that something perhaps we should be looking at? Is looking at a sort of forward 3 or 5 year strategy, which is a flat rental base in terms of what that increase might look like over time, so there isn't some of these movements up and down to such an extent. And that's the real opportunity we've got together, working with elected members and others who might want to join part of that discussion.
Thanks. And you've said, sorry.
2 seconds.
I was just going to add a comment, if that's okay, Councillor. I was just going to say, ideally, from a numbers point of view, you would want a flatter trend. But if you think about what the catalyst has been for those more recent increases, they were unexpected. So they've been in react to national, international events and so on. So even if you plan on that basis, it doesn't always mean that you're going to be able to follow through and deliver on that basis. I just thought it was worth making that point, because actually it is relatively flat up until you get to some of those places in the last few years, where you're starting to see the prices creeping up, and we've had less certainty about what the levels of increase needed to be, because we were in a very reactive cycle with the, you know, various announcements and triggers for some of the increased costs.
My next question has become part of a kind of tradition, because I've even been asking myself it when I was in convener, and so I'm going to just ask it again today. Is there a capital programme for the garage sites?
I've been working through the garage site, so Councillor Harrison asked me this for a week. He says, Murray, you've asked us about this investment strategy and asset review. Is that going to include the garage sites? We said yes, it definitely is. So that is going to take into account the garage and lock-up sites. What I have said though, and I'll be very clear that we already know, because obviously there has been a process where we've been actively demolishing some sites. And we do know that there is going to be some sites where they just won't be financially viable unless there's a complete significant change in the rental structure for some of those sites, because the investment required won't be substantial to give them another life. So the rental strategy would either need to be reflective of that, or we basically look at a different option. Now, there could be other options possible in terms of some of the sites. There's been a huge growth in the last number of years in terms of some of these storage containers. Now, I'm not suggesting that we turn them into storage container sites, but there could be an opportunity in terms of some of the community work, in terms of if the community would look to take some of them on to deliver some aspects of that. And you've seen that in Clackmannanshire, where they've set up some of the lock-ups for like bike repairs, etc. So there might be some community solutions that we need to consider as part of that work as well.
Sorry, my final question was kind of similar, I suppose, in the sense that, I'm sorry for missing it, so I'll ask you first of all, is there an indication here in terms of our capital programme and the level of investment for ongoing maintenance, in terms of, what I'm specifically going to talk about, it's my bugbear, and I'm going to ask you about this, is about drains. Sorry, no, it's not drains. It's gutters going into drains. It's gutters. The biggest cause of damage to buildings is people failing to repair their gutters and clean them. We've stopped doing that, and I know we've stopped doing it because I've seen that we don't do it anymore. That will come back and bite us big time if we don't get on top of that. Is there acknowledgement of that within the current capital programme?
That would obviously wouldn't be capital investment, although in our capital programme, where we have been doing roof work, we have been changing gutters to deep fill gutters, which have got a slightly, the deep fill gutters have got a slightly different approach in terms of their cleaning regime. But I do take the point that it's something which perhaps is when we had this sort of cyclical maintenance programme, which was largely painting, and it did some of those repairs in terms of the gutter cleaning. I have spoken to Andy about this just recently, because it came up in an FOI, actually around the Bocky flats. They didn't actually have gutters, to be honest, but it is something we are aware of, and actually in terms of some of that work we need to do around the stock condition, it is something which you are correct. It's better to spend money to be preventative rather than reactive, as we've probably seen over the last week, where some homes and some perhaps some properties in the local area where perhaps haven't carried out some of that preventive maintenance have been hit hard with some of the storm weather.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Law.
Sorry if I have missed this. I've not seen it before, but I was just thinking maybe in future it'd be good if we could show, because obviously we're talking about the capital programme, if we could show the rise in what the cost of like the average kitchen is costing, or bathroom or windows. I think that'd be really good in order to kind of illustrate the jump in the prices, because I think it was, I don't know, a box of grout or something. I was told that the price had like jumped like 50%. So could we look at doing that in future to help kind of maybe for me as well? I don't know about, I suppose it'll help everybody else. I think it would be good if that could happen. Do you agree?
Yes, I would think that'd be beneficial. What I would say though is, for the majority of our works, there is obviously frameworks around some of those. So some of that might not necessarily change too much within some of those term contracts, although there is some movement within our contracts for increases. Interestingly, you raise that because the life cycle replacement I was talking about actually did have some prices noted against it in 2018, and actually it might be worthwhile comparing what we had there versus what's now coming through. But yeah, we're happy. We can maybe pick that up at a performance meeting actually to go a deep dive into some of that in more detail. But yeah, it might be prudent going forward in the future just to have that highlighted.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coyne, do you want to come back in?
Thanks, Camilla. I want to nip back to Craig's question about flattening out the increases over time, having a steady increase. And the argument against that was that we'll get hit by a sudden event at some point in the future. And we've been lucky this time that the sudden event has been mitigated by the restructuring of the rents. So it's not such a bad thump on the tenants this time round. That won't happen every time. Do you accept that there is an alternative solution, which is to, let's say that the inflation was running at 3% nice and steadily, is you make your rent increases 3.5%, 3.75%, thereby building up a bit of a war chest so that when the day comes and inflation jumps to 8%, 9%, you can soak it up. That's what the war chest is for. If at the end of 5, 7 years the event hasn't happened, you can lower the graph a wee bit and manage it. It's kind of like an insurance policy.
Yeah, it's a good point and something worthy of the group who wants to get involved in looking at over the summer to bring that forward. And as Craig referenced earlier, the commitment back 2004-ish, that was actually the approach by the council at the time to raise rents and to build up CFCR and build up reserves to try and help. Well, one of the reasons was potentially to help mitigate some of what you've outlined there, but certainly that's something we can consider, yeah.
Thanks. Can we turn now to page 55 and the graph at 1010? Sorry, I despise graphs that don't have the legends explaining exactly what the hell these numbers are. I have to sit there and spend hours of my time working out what that's all about. Please explain to me what the axes mean. And I'm thinking the bottom one is just years from today, or from a fixed point. I'm guessing that. The bit up the side is presumably some kind of percentage of debt in relation to the total fees charged. I don't know what it is. I'd like to explain to me the mathematics behind the debt affordability graph. What's the formula for it?
So to answer your first question, the X and Y axis, you are correct. On the X axis going across is obviously the number of years. Apologies that we will make sure that we take this feedback on board. The Y-axis is the level, the proportion of debt in relation to overall income, is it? Yeah. Yeah. So it's how much debt effectively we are carrying. So in terms of so as you see, this graph goes up. So it doesn't come out well because I've only got a black and white copy, unfortunately, as well. So it's got
the various line between the sort of headline rates in terms of what you would accept in terms of
borrowing. So the high risk is when you reach a sort of 40%
sort of borrowing threshold between your sort of, it's a bit like your own mortgage, that if you've taken on a house that's beyond your means effectively. So looking at your total income, what's your outstanding borrowing for that? So if you've got 100, if your income's 100 million, you've got debt of 40 million, that's approaching the 40% threshold in simple mathematical terms. So what this graph's explaining is that as we're moving throughout the years, we will be in breach of that debt affordability rate. So that's what I was indicating earlier. At that stage, similar to that, we would be in a position where our income is less than our expenditure, would not be producing a surplus. So it's an area of caution, and that's why we've put it in the report to indicate that we really need to look at our future rent increases to flatten that graph back down in terms of the affordability range, which is acceptable in terms of organisation as to what you might want to legitimise in terms of what you've overall borrowed. And similarly, that has connotations with the council's overall borrowing position as to how much it wants to borrow as well.
Right, so let me see if I understand this. The figure on the y-axis is basically the expenditure divided by the income?
It's basically your total outstanding borrowing against your income.
The borrowing, got
Yeah.
it. Okay, and the dotted graph, the debt affordability is the cumulative effect of that, is it?
Yeah, so what has been input into this graph is a modelling of our future rent increases and our future capital, the assumed future capital programme. So the capital programme is laid out in terms of the 5-year programme. It's been uplifted for inflation. Some of our other core costs have been uplifted for inflation. Similarly, assumed rent rises have been put into the model to look at how income will grow, how expenditure, where that leaves us in terms of CFCR and what our borrowing requirements are. So it's a combination of those 5 or 6 factors that then deliver that graph. But obviously we can spend some more, again, if you'd like, we can spend some more fundamental time going into the individual specifics of the equations on this graph if you'd like.
I appreciate that, Mark.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mary. We might like to do that. So what the graph is telling us is that if we don't do anything, we don't make a change, it's going to get a hell of a lot worse. Is that really what the message of that is? That could be a wee bit underneath for the simpleton. If things don't get better, it's going to get worse, kind of thing. So, if I may continue, convener, is that all right? Yeah, that's that one down. Page 57. Yeah. Again, there's another graph I looked at, and it didn't immediately hit me what the story was. Can you just talk me through it? Pretend I'm an intelligent sixth former who doesn't know anything about it.
That was one thing I did miss out in the statement. We've been championing the last few housing papers about, we brought all this up, and we've got this great cover report that meets the UNCRC objectives and making it easy to read for the kids. Then we produced this report, which when I went on the Microsoft 365, it tells me that it's got a reading level beyond master's education. So, something for us definitely to reflect on. But yeah, this graph is to be seen in combination with the other one. It basically it's part of that equation where it shows that over the number of years that the expectation is that if we continue within our trends, that our CFCR, our surpluses, will drop off, basically. Although, yes, without the information on the X and Y axis, that might be a bit difficult, but we did go through this one on the actual members' brief.
Thank you. And what was my question? Page 59. So back to this. 59. Oh, yeah, something interesting. 59. According to table 13.3, I'm being a wee bit cheeky here. We're spending the annual budget for 24-25 is £10 billion. If you look at the header, it's still got the... Another wee correction. Fine. That's okay. Let's go to that 59, we dealt with that, page 60, what was that one now? 60. Yeah, West Hall. About West Hall, will the project now exceed the currently approved budget? So the project, finishing it by December 25, will that exceed the currently approved budget?
So that exact question is currently under review. Actually, I've been working with the service to look at the current costs. As you know, there was an issue with the contractor, the original contractor. So it's involved quite a lot of work with Hubco and SFT. So we've just the other day, as members were walking into a briefing, we were just having the latest of those meetings. We've not got the final information through yet, but it will come back into council if required. But I mean, obviously, from our point of view, we want to keep it as close as possible to what council's already agreed. So that may mean that we don't need to come back, but we communicate the outcome anyway.
As a part B to that, if it is the case, do we have any wiggle room between the minimum standard that we must apply to the build and the standard that we have chosen to apply?
I mean, I think that very well could be an option if we found ourselves in a place where the costs that are coming back are higher than what council had already approved. It may be an option to reconsider that standard as one of the things for council and take into any decisions should they be required.
I think this is my last one. No, I'm not bothered asking that one. Okay, thanks very much, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Quinn.
Thank you. Quick question, page 61, about renewable heating. It says we've installed some air source heat pumps in a small number of pilot properties. How many properties have we installed in? And what are our plans to do more renewable heating and heat pumps going forward? Thank you.
The ones we installed this year were all funded by a UK government grant, the Eco4 scheme. I think it was either 4 or 5 that have been done, and there's another 2 which we're hoping to install this year. We have been focusing on those areas that are off the gas network, Lower Mains and Dollar in particular. So it's low numbers, but we are working through. It is part of our considerations, though, that at some stage somebody will need to bite the bullet and actually have a sort of full-blown survey or pilot initiative in terms of installing air source heat pumps in a gas area to see the relative performance of these, so we can actually evidence that work to tenants.
Can we not be doing that sometime soon?
Yeah, there is budget retained in here for renewable heating systems. I was actually in discussion with a professor at Glasgow University over this very matrix. It's around about what's actually most important about that is the real support to the tenants who actually take up these systems, and actually the monitoring around how they actually work and operate, and how they actually the returns and the cost for the actual tenants to then sort of prove the business case for that. So it would be a question about us potentially looking for somebody to actually work with tenants in that operation to sort of prove the business case.
Thanks.
Okay, if there are Councillor Holden.
Just so to add a couple of things, just as we were talking and we were asking questions, but one is about, the report refers to obviously the pressures that we're having on our housing stock because of the number of homeless applications. I'm aware of a couple of changes in legislation that have led to change in practice with regards to resecuring properties. I'm not going to go into that now because it's not something that's going to lead us anywhere nice today, but you'll be aware of the practice of double housing, basically, where families are using more than one house, not through any particular need for that. But are you aware of it? Are you aware of the impact that is having on our pressures? And what I'm meaning by that, just for people that are not aware of the term double housing, it's just simply families that have taken a decision to have more than one house, just because they can. And you maybe have a person, the dad might be staying in one house and all the other families in another, but they're still a family and they're still living together occasionally, but they just keep the house. It's just a nice wee thing to have. But it's not a nice wee thing for us to have, because the impact it's having in terms of the homeless applications, the availability of stock, the number of houses that have to go homeless, the number of houses that are available for people, and the length of times that have been waiting lists. So are you aware of the practice? And more importantly, what are we doing about that?
I'm maybe not fully familiar with the full-known practice, but we are familiar with some cases in the waiting list where there's families certainly split, where they've formed and they've got separate households for whatever reason. Certainly in terms of the session we have with members tomorrow looking at investment strategy, there's perhaps we could perhaps delve into slightly more detail around the homelessness pressures and the factors in terms of our development programme, because clearly developing and deliver more houses is clearly the answer in terms of our shortfall in terms of homelessness provision. But happy to hear more about your case examples.
Okay. The final question was just about the speed with which we're turnover again. We've spoken about this in the past, the turnover of properties that are empty. I'm not going to go into specific details about it all and say that there can be sometimes quite considerable periods of time before when a house becomes vacant, to the point where it's allocated and sold. How will this assist in that process and having a quicker turnover?
So we have we've re-established our weekly performance meetings with our property team and house officers, and it's been really to the benefit of having those meetings where we do keep track of what's happening on the ground, what's hampering us, what's causing us grief, what's causing challenges. And some of that's actually generated discussions with Scottish Government officials. So challenges with the meters, etc. There's a Scottish Government officials and Scottish Power who are actually going to come to our performance meetings actually hear specifically about some of the challenges we've got with our meters. In terms of our performance just now, from where the void report that came to members the other summer, at that stage we had about 100 plus properties. We're now trying to work to having a sort of run rate of about 40 to 45 properties. And it's really at the case where the number goes beyond that is where we have stretches in our capacity. And that's the part where we've been looking at in terms of, is there something in terms of, do we need additional resource? How would we build up a business case around that? In terms of bringing that resource, is there resource elsewhere within the authority to help look at that? So even just during the course of this week, one of our challenges this week, for example, is the cleaning and clearing of the void properties to get them ready either for the tradesmen to go in to do the work or to get them cleared for the new tenant to actually view or to take on the tenancy. So we've been looking at our corporate resources and under Neil Herties in terms of the cleaning and janitorial staff to perhaps help with that aspect to try and move that process forward, because that's hampering the trades work going forward. At present, we're turning around our properties around 56 days. Now that's quicker than it was when we put up that report. It's obviously a cumulative figure in terms of Councillor Coyne. We won't see the full benefit of some of our interactions until the next financial year, where we start the slate clean, as it were. We obviously, when we did, this local authority has reached #1 in the country in terms of its void performance a few years ago. At that stage, we were turning properties over just over 30 odd days. So we do know that there's work to be done. We are taking action. We're trying to see where we can make improvements, so to try and lessen the time between people getting an offer and accept it.
I've had a good time, so in my final stab at that one, so just because that's interesting. So what were we doing then when it was 30 odd days that we're not doing now when it's 50 plus days, and it's been higher than that? And in some cases it can be a lot higher than that. And so can we not take lessons from the past, or is there things there we can see that was why we were doing a quicker turnover, and let's try and reintroduce these things, or is it just external factors?
It's a combination of factors, to be honest. So our baseline, you are correct, our baseline so some of this work was spurred on with the Vanguard consultant, as you may recall, back in 2015-16. So our baseline then was about 85 days on average. We look at voids maybe slightly differently from some other operators. We take it from the point of the keys to the person moving in, so we cover the full range. And In terms of the work we did there, it was really about making sure that we really worked on the system. We ironed out some of the problems. During COVID and some of that did drift, hold our hands up in terms of some of that process. That's why we've really emphasised, since that report came up to council, the work that we've done jointly between the services, between property and housing, really to make sure that tie up. It obviously also has there's work in terms of the Scottish Welfare Fund, and obviously the Cheryl's having discussions with Ben, looking at some of those cases to try and progress them as quickly as possible. So you have to look at some of this within the round, and it's just really about us trying to identify some of the issues and working on some of the solutions to try and move that forward. But we are where we are because performance has drifted. It'll be next year before we perhaps get a true reflection in terms of where we are in terms of that turnaround figure.
Okay, if there are no further questions, thank you very much, Murray. You're allowed down the darkened room for a while. Councillor McTaggart to move the paper.
Thanks, Chair. This paper asks us to consider and approve the proposed rent rise for the next financial year, as well as the capital plan, the anticipated borrowing requirements from 25-26 until 29-30, together with other elements relevant to the housing revenue account, which is what we'd normally expect to see in this annual paper. However, this year is different in that we're also being asked to consider and approve a change to the rent structure. The paper sets out the capital spending proposals and outlines the agreed improvements to our stock over the next financial year, and includes a projection for planned capital works and their costs over the next 5 years, and asks that we approve the borrowing costs needed to achieve those improvement works. Significant delays to our capital improvement works would result in higher costs in the future and have a detrimental effect to the quality of our stock over that time. The demand for housing in Clackmannanshire continues to grow, and we must continue to do our best to meet that demand, while also ensuring that our homes are of a standard expected by our current and future tenants. In Clackmannanshire, we've always set a high standard for the quality of our housing, and that's as it should be. Our tenants have quite rightly come to expect that high standard, but more recently it's become harder to predict the financial pressures of continuing to meet those standards. Since COVID, the cost of materials and labour have risen sharply, and while they've begun to level out, they'll never come back to pre-COVID levels. This has put an enormous strain on our financial position. Additionally, higher wage rises and, more recently, the unexpected and onerous hike in employer national insurance contributions imposed by the UK government has stretched our housing revenue budget still further. And members should be aware that these additional costs are not funded by the government. The housing revenue account must fully meet those additional costs. The appendices and the tables in the paper further explain the cost pressures faced by the HRA. The paper talks about the stock condition survey and the asset management strategy, both of which will inform the future strategy around housing stock. And a housing needs and demand assessment is underway to look at how our housing provision can better meet the needs of our current tenants and those who are on our waiting lists. The findings of those surveys and assessments will undoubtedly add further pressures to the HRA budget. The paper also outlines the proposed new rent structure. Currently, Clackmannanshire has a flat rent structure which unfairly impacts those who are in smaller properties. Indeed, if this flat structure were to continue, at some point in the not too distant future, our tenants in the smaller properties who are on receipts of benefit, who are on state pension or on a low income, could reach the point where they no longer qualify for housing benefit. The housing assistance rates are set by the UK government and are obviously on a scale where those in larger properties receive more financial assistance towards housing costs than those in smaller properties. The rent for our larger properties is comfortably inside the margins for assistance, but there's very little headroom for those in our smaller properties. The proposed tiered structure seeks to address that as outlined in the paper. The intention of this proposal is not to increase the income values of the HRA. It is intended to offer fairness to the rent structure, and I believe it will achieve that. I'd ask you to note the findings of the rent rise consultation and that of the proposed rent structure, which are both positive and which were considered during questions. Under the proposed new structure, it's estimated that at least 70% of our tenants will qualify for full housing cost assistance. Of the remaining 30%, some have partial cost assistance, while others may become eligible for financial assistance if the rent charges are approved and imposed in April. The housing team have already given a commitment to visit every tenant who will see a rise in their rent following the proposed changes and will offer their assistance to ensure household income maximisation is explored and tenants are supported. I thank the housing team for their work on this paper and for the commitment they've shown to ensuring that our tenants and residents receive the best possible service across the whole of Clackmannanshire. Happy to propose the paper. Convener, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Law to second.
I'm just going to formally second. I think Councillor McTaggart's in our proposal covered everything that I would like to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The paper is now open for debate. Anybody wish to debate the paper? Councillor Holden, to be followed by Councillor Coyne.
Just got a couple of points just to make. Just the first thing, there's been, I noticed that the press are here today, so it's really, really important that we didn't start a hair running about stock transfer, because it's never been spoken about. And I think my understanding of the situation, I think Councillor Coyne was referring about whether we've got, if Council decides it wants to look at it, then we decide that. Equally, we decide if we don't. And we don't, I don't think. And I think to suggest that we do, would set things on a course that we don't want to go down, really. But we're not considering that, and we've considered it long before, and for all the reasons that we discussed then, and these reasons have never changed. I don't see a reason to kind of revisit that, but that's just me personally. But I'm pretty sure that the administration and other councils are not minded to do that. I think it's important to get it out there. In terms of the rent increases, we've spoken about the kind of external factors. I understand all that, and we acknowledge that we played a role in it. But I was serious in the sense that there was a departure about, I think it may have been 2 years ago, and it was the first time really since 2004 that happened, where rent levels became back into that political arena again about, well, we propose 5, well, we'll beat you, we'll put it to 3. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. And there has to be almost an amnesty on that basis, that we understand that we can't play fast and loose with rents, because it doesn't benefit anybody. It doesn't benefit us, it doesn't benefit our service, and it certainly doesn't benefit the tenants. So we left that practice a long time ago, and although we can have our ding-dongs about certain things in the future and our arguments about things, it's important we don't argue really too much about that. The facts are the facts. That's it. The cases are there, and the officers have done the work and they present on that basis. So, although it can be difficult sometimes to approve, I mean, I'm finding it, quite difficult today to look at a 10% increase across the minutes, but then when you hear the arguments put forward, the convincing arguments that, 70% will make the threshold for assistance, and then in actual fact, the time the model, the way you model it, that you could actually, more people would be able to reach that assistance level as well. It's nuanced, so it changes your thinking on it a wee bit. I'm still not comfortable with it, but we're never going to be comfortable with it. I don't think anybody is. I'm not any different than any other councils. So, also, the point was made, an interesting one about, I think what was being suggested by Councillor Coyne was about just keeping in line with inflation, basically, at the minimum. But you could always decide to go beyond that at any point in time, but you can't be beholden to that. There's no future administration or council could be beholden to a decision to do that. But I think the logic is sound. If you start having your increases, if you're having any increases, and you're having these, because we've been years when we've not, but if you're having increases in the below the rate of inflation, then you're just storing up problems for yourself. If there's an understanding that there's, as a council, that we're going to approach these things on the basis that we'll always kind of stick to at least an inflation increase, where we can, because it just kind of protects us to some degree, I suppose, in future. So that was good. We spoke about the garage stock. I always go on about that, and that's the first. I actually don't think it is the first year I've been told that we're doing stuff in the garages. I think I get told that every year, and I keep on saying, well, where's the programme about it for? I've never seen it. But it's really, it is, because you can't keep on asking for money for something, and then asking for more money for something. when you're not investing in it. So the guy that's got the roof with the hole in it and comes out and he's paying, you know, X amount every month, and then we're telling him we're going to pay an extra 10% on top of that, and he's not actually had the hole repaired. And the strategy is that we don't repair holes. That's not sustainable. I've been saying it for some time, so if I say that we're departing from that, and I'm getting nods, so that's really what we need to have. Final point was around the pressures that we're all facing in terms of the homeless applications, the number of applications, and I've spoken about the practice whereby tenants some tenants are living in more than one property, families, and it's a lifestyle choice. There's no real kind of driving force behind that other than the fact that, and I know what happens, a few people deny it, I'm telling you this. There are people with more than one house, they're getting financial assistance for that. Sometimes it's a bit easier just not to go home with the wife, maybe, or the wife doesn't want to go home with her husband, I don't know, or her partners didn't want to go home with each other. But the simple fact is that's causing a major impact in terms of your ability to manage your stock. It should be as unpopular as drink driving or some other type of thing. We have to make people understand that because you take a lifestyle choice to have more than one house, that's not going to go. And that's the area we should be focusing on. And it should be, and I've never encouraged folk to claim about anything, but there certainly should be at least something that would be discussed about the impact that that's having on everybody. Nobody can get houses. You've got young families that are coming back, experience it every day. Another one yesterday, and they're coming up, there's a lassie having a burn, and she's right up to the final point, and still not got a house yet, they're panicking, they're scared. And we're like that because some people are living in a house when they need to be living in it. Not because of the size, just because they're living in a house, they're taking a lifestyle choice to do that, and they're getting away with it. And they shouldn't be able to get away with it. We should be really making that really, the public should be on top of that and be understanding that they're actually cheating all of us when they're doing that. And that's just a thing I've been thinking about quite recently. I just think it's a bit of a cheek and we need to start dealing with it. But in terms of the paper itself, as I say, we've all been having difficulties with this. I mean, I'm going to support the paper. I think I have to support the paper because there is a recognition of our role as well in previous years when we've not taken this. And I understand we took some decisions to freeze the rent and stuff simply because it was the right thing to do at the time. I understand that. I'm not criticising ourselves for doing that. But we have to be a wee bit more aware that when we set rent levels, what impact it's going to have on our future ability to invest. And it's the thing we've always spoken about. £1 that we don't increase it by now is a lot more than that when it comes to further years when you're trying to invest in your stock. So it's really important to do so. I'm happy to support the paper, and I thank the officers for it. The whole way these papers are written has changed, is different, and I think they're actually better. I'm like Dennis. I'm not a fan of graphs at all, but they are helpful, and they are more helpful if they've got the X and Y and Kings of the so you can never take that on board, but it's a good paper, and I'm happy to support it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Holden. Councillor Coyne to be followed by Councillor Rennie.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, appreciate what's been said about the paper. I think it's a very good paper, well put together. One or two minor glitches, ignore those for the moment. Generally, direction of travel here is one to be lauded, I think. And the main comment I wanted to make was in relation to what I said earlier about the Intelligent Sixth Former. Having listened to Councillor McTaggart's proposal for the paper, I think it's a very good idea that kind of thing would be included as a foresheet to the papers for the benefit of the public who are expected to read these if they wish to, and the councillors themselves who may purport to grasp everything that's being written down here, but may not. And it helps to steer your thinking. Jane has lined out, in simple terms, what the paper's about. So it gives you a direction of travel. So as you're going through it, you kind of know what this is all about. Because the case, the case builds slowly when you're reading these papers, but if you kind of know that the destination is Paris as opposed to San Diego, it is helpful. And I think that those kind of proposals should become part of the papers, if that is possible. I know the papers come out a week before the meeting, and perhaps the proposal was written last night, I don't know. Maybe it was written a week ago. But if it was written a week ago, it could become part of the papers as a foresheet, for the benefit of, as I say, people who are not savvy in these kind of areas. Thank you.
Thank you for your interesting suggestion, Councillor Klein. Councillor Rennie.
Yeah, this is going to be really difficult for me to say because we've been working for a long time to work really constructively together as a full group of council, and I'm still really committed to that, and I want to do that moving forward. I have a sticking point on this paper, I'm afraid, and I think the paper is really well presented. It's no criticism in that way. I think it gives us really excellent information, and I'm really supportive of the new rent structure. I think that's excellent. I've communicated that with Councillor McTaggart before, that I'm supportive of that. It's unfortunate in a way that we've been presented all the options together to agree them all together as well, because I agree with everything in the paper. The only thing that's a sticking point for me is the 10% rent increase. I think I can't move away from the fact that people are really struggling right now. You know, we're dealing with massive inflation out in the community, and this rise is actually above inflation in terms of the rent increase. What I'm really tense about is that when we put out our consultation, we gave people bad, different sort of rent possibilities, and it left not much room for them to really give a view on whether they thought that was okay. We also have a moving feast. Councillor McTaggart quite rightly talked about the national insurance increases, but that in itself, we're not absolutely sure what that's going to be yet, because the Scottish Government are doing a lot of campaigning with the UK Government to get that fully covered, and we're not in a position yet to know if that will be the case. So a lot of what we're dealing with in our finances just now is really challenging, because things are moving all the time. And I noted that there was a massive change in what our capital programme was, to requiring more funding for it now than what we did before, when I asked the question. So again, things move all the time in council, and I do understand, because the argument's been made to me before, that this is cumulative. So if we don't do 10% now, it may hit us next year and the year after. I understand all of that, but I think we're still in a bit of flux. But my ultimate thing is, while I can approve all of it, the side of it where for a 3-bedroom property, you're looking at an increase of £40 a month. For a 3-bedroom property, that's a family. So there's potentially a family living in a 3-bedroom property. And I take Councillor McTaggart's point that might take people into the housing benefit side. I don't think we should be feeling that way. I think people are trying to get out of housing benefit. They're trying to get back to work. They're really struggling to do so. They don't want to sit on housing benefit. So I think, you know, but in some ways I've heard people time and again saying, I can't really go and get a job because I'll lose all this in my benefits. And that becomes a real struggle for them. And I think, you know, looking at that, like some of the higher rises are like people who have got families. And for me, I hear people all the time saying to me, I have to choose whether I'm putting my heating on or I'm feeding my family. I need to choose whether I'm feeding my children or I'm feeding myself, you know, or I go hungry because my children need to eat. So although for us, often we're sitting as councillors, £40 a month doesn't seem very much. To somebody in that scenario, £40 a month is catastrophic. And I do fully take on board what the Tenants and Residents Federation are saying, although, like the point was made about consultation, I think they've got years of experience because they're going into homes all the time and they're seeing what people are facing. And I think, you know, we see that as councillors as well. We're going out and doing our inquiries and we see what people are facing all the time, and it's really challenging. And while I totally understand the challenges that we're facing as a council, the financial arguments, all of that, at my heart, I'm afraid I just cannot approve a 10% increase. I can approve everything else in the paper, but I can't approve that. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Quinn.
Aye, thanks. No, obviously it's not nice seeing 10% increases, but you know, at the same time, our rents are good value for money. The tenants agree they're good value for money. We've seen from the kind of consultations and that. You know, if they don't like, you know, being a tenant and they want to go get your private tenant somewhere else, well, they'll pay a hell of a lot more than that. I agree with a lot of what Councillor Holden and Councillor Coyne said in regards to the increases. See, in my mind, this is really just, it's a numbers game. We've got to keep up with their spending and their wages and other things. So really, apart from agreeing a business plan, I don't think really councillors, we should be really making a decision. We agree the business plan and the increases fall in line with that business plan that just match up the numbers. In my mind, that's how it should work. And I think, you know, it would make life easier, and then we don't have to argue about where, you know, whether the increase is fair or not fair or that. It's like it's the increase that's required for the business plan that we agreed. That's the way it should work in my mind. I don't agree with freezes of any kind. Don't agree with rent freezes. Don't agree with council tax freezes, because everything has to get paid for. And some people might think they get a little bit of a win because something's been frozen. They're not paying a little bit extra, but they're paying somewhere else. You know, where council tax freezes the other year when the Scottish Government, guess what? Everyone was paying because a bunch of other services got cut because they weren't paying that. And if we, you know, in times where we haven't increased rent by our costs and we froze rent, all it is just it delays making a bigger increase later on. So I don't agree with that. And but I'm very happy to support the paper. Like I say, I think our rents are very fair. I think the tenants agree they're very fair. I think we need to keep up with our spending for our programme. But I don't like that we have to make a decision. I think we should set the plan in motion, and then the decision should be made kind of from that point until we next review the plan again. That's the way I think it should be. But I'm happy to support the paper. And thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other contributions to the debate? Councillor McCluckie.
Thanks, Convener. Echoing about what Councillor Rennie said in terms of there's a number of items to ask for approval in the paper, and we do agree with pretty much all it other than the 10%. I agree with what Councillor Quincy said in terms of the response to the consultation. 64% of people have agreed or strongly agreed that the rent is currently affordable. However, when you look at the other graph, you've got 44% of respondents suggesting that a 10% increase is, they disagree or they strongly disagree with that. And I think that's the part we need to listen to as well. And I agree with what Councillor Rennie was saying. It's a really valid point Councillor McTaggart made, that the change to the structure along the increase will therefore mean that people may then be eligible for further benefits which would allow them to pay the increase. But I don't believe that's a positive move for them. I don't believe that's something we should be encouraging to go forward. I think we should be going the opposite way for that. On the subject of garages that Councillor Holden was bringing up as well, I know I get a lot of sort of contact in my ward regarding garages and how disused they are. There's one particular block that look apparently unused. However, the housing service tell me that the annual fee is still being paid. So it's hard to argue with that. But in terms of going forward, and it was mentioned, I think Murray mentioned it about community takeover of garages. I know there is one housing developer who would very much like to purchase a garage block and turn it into social housing. And I think it's probably something that should be explored and a conversation should be had with him to see what the proposal is for that. I can chat to you about that later if you want, housing, about it, because we spoke to them before, but I'll come to you and speak to you about that. So something that again could be looked at going forward. I know it's a difficult one when housing say they're paying the annual fee, and I totally get that. So whatever the owner or the renter of that garage is using it for is fair enough, but there's an option there if a community takeover of garages is a possibility. If we do have somewhere where there's a developer wants to turn it into social housing, issues that we do have for housing in the county, I think it's something that we really should be exploring. But going back to the paper again, the multiple options for approval, yeah, the rent restructure and how it's restructured, I think we do look upon that favourably. However, the one sticking point that Councillor Rennie did point out is I don't think we can really agree a 10% increase. It's way above what there's been in the last 7 years, and the fact that it's likely to potentially put people more reliant on benefits than it would be maybe to encourage them to seek employment. I don't agree with that, unfortunately. So that's all I'd say.
Okay, thank you. Any other contributions to the debate? Councillor?
Yeah, basically to agree with Mark and Janine, what they've said is a would, but also the lockups and regarding the work that's required to be done on them. There's some of these, some constituents have basically rented them for decades, and they're, the lockups are languishing, and like you say, if there's a hole in the roof, often or not, it can't be repaired, you've got the whole asbestos thing as well, so it would be good to get that done quickly, because it is a real sore point, and we're asked about it often, and the community buy-over as well. I know in Dollar they've been looking at this for a good wee while now. So, yeah, that's a big thing. But thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coyne, do you want to come back in?
Yes, thanks. I want to address the issue of the 10% increase. I think it's quite an important one. It's the one little blemish, I think, that's in the paper as far as some of our members present are concerned. There's a sound, practical, financial reason for putting the rents up 10%, and that's been explained very clearly. The vast majority of tenants will be able to afford that, I think. We're not disagreeing with that, but there will be people who will suffer. We have mechanisms in the state system for helping to deal with people who are suffering financially. It may not be the dignity that they'd be looking for, but you know, when a guy's in the water drowning, you're not worried about the colour of the lifebelt that's being thrown at him. So we need to take account that for the greater good, we maybe have to have a small section of the population suffering what they might perceive as the indignity of being on benefit. It's not, in my mind, it's a valid point, a sympathetic point that they make in opposing the rent increase, but I don't think it makes pragmatic sense to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no others, Councillor McTaggart, do you want the opportunity to sum up?
Sorry, I've got my hand up. I don't. Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead,
I just wanted to come back on what Councillor Coyne had said just there. It's a really sad situation, Councillor Coyne. I'm afraid that, you know, having worked in the third sector for 30 years, the structures that you would hope would be in place to assist people don't really assist people in the way that they need to be assisted. People go into massive amounts of debt, and while Citizens Advice are an organisation that can assist with that, there's only so much they can do. So people will just sort of go into more and more and more debt, and then ultimately what happens from that is you end up with people coming to agencies like mine who worked in mental health who had suicidal ideation because they felt there was nowhere else to go and there was no options open to them. So while we hope and we would wish that the structures are there, they have been decimated over the years. So along with every other service that's lost funding, the third sector and agencies that could support people in the past aren't there anymore. And our kind of statutory sectors don't have the capacity or the funding to support people anymore either. So people end up in severe disadvantage. And since COVID, we've seen vast numbers of people who have suffered from long COVID and other significant long-term health issues, which has exacerbated things more for them. And, you know, most of them really, really struggle to get benefits. I've spent many times sitting with clients trying to get disability benefits who are put through all sorts of humiliation to try and get them. And I think that's only going to get worse. So while we would hope that the structures are in place, sadly they're not. So that's really just all I wanted to end on with that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McTaggart, do you want an opportunity to sum up?
I had no intention of summing up, actually, but now I'm afraid we have to answer some of these points. I take on board fully the comments made by Councillor Coyne and Councillor Holden. Perhaps over recent years we've been maybe a bit too generous when it comes to thinking about how we raise the rents. And maybe if we'd had a more pragmatic approach to raising the rents, regardless of every other factor that might have come into play there, then we mightn't be in the situation where we have to raise them by 10%. Nobody round this table, officers and councillors, want to raise the rents by 10%. I want to fundamentally assure the Labour group of that. Nobody round this table wants to. It is a necessity. If we do not raise the rents by 10%, there will be a detrimental effect to the housing stock. Research done by Alacho maybe 3 or 4 years ago found that poor housing had a massive effect on people's feelings of poverty. Regardless if they had enough financial help from the government, which is that we don't make these decisions about who gets financial help. If they need financial help, the government say they get financial help. That financial help did not help them feel less poor, because they were living in a scene of poverty, because they were living in dilapidated housing. And no matter how much financial help they got, their surroundings increased their feeling of poverty. In Clackmannanshire, as I said in my proposal, we take pride in being able to offer people a quality standard of living. So even if they are on the breadline, they don't feel as bad as if they were sitting in a property that's falling to bits because we do not have the capacity to repair it. I feel that the whole argument around not raising it by 10% to meet our capital programme costs is wrong, because over time that 10% is going to cost us 20, 30, 40%. Continued repairs on properties that are dilapidated. Continued cost hikes on the things that we need to make those properties whole again. We would be throwing good money after bad if we don't deal with this problem right now. I think it's a sad fact that people in this country do need financial assistance, even when they're working. Working families need financial assistance from the government. Now, if we continue along the lines that we're going, they're going to need more and more and more financial help. Now, that hasn't been helped by the winter fuel allowance being withdrawn. That means that a number of pensioners are now on pension credits. If we did not think about the state of their homes, for example, draft proofing, double glazing, roof repairs, heating replacements, what kind of state would they be in if we do not have the financial capacity to deliver those programmes? We are again making people's lives poorer. I don't agree with hiking up rent rises year on year. If it is a necessity, then it has to be done. We don't want it to be done any more than the Labour Group want it to be done, but it is a necessity. Through the review of the rent structure, we have tried our best to make this as fair as possible. And the review of the rent structure will increase the capacity of people to access housing cost assistance. And as I said in my proposal, over 70% of people will be able to access that. I don't condone the fact that over 70% of people in Clackmannanshire should need to access housing cost assistance. It's a fact of life that I have no influence over. We do have an influence over the way people live their lives and the comfort value of the properties that they live in. And I'm really disturbed by the fact that the Labour Group feel that we should allow our properties to reduce in quality and just turn a blind eye to that. I'm sorry, but I cannot condone that. I'll leave it there. I think I've said enough, but I hope the people around this table can accept that it's necessary and will accept the paper. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McTaggart, just to try and summarise the paper, subject to the two changes that were highlighted by Murray, present the paper. Councillor recommended to approve an increase in council house rents by 10% to the base rent for the financial year of 25-26, effective from the 31st of March 25, as set out in Appendix 6. We've been asked to approve the implementation of a new rental structure, as detailed in Section 5 and 6 of the report for domestic dwellings from the 31st of March 25. Note that implementation means 72% of tenants will be paying less rent per week in 25-26 under the new rental structure than they would if the current structure were to be retained. We're also been asked to approve those items listed between 2.4 to 2.10, and to further note the two issues at 2.11 and 2.12, which is the results of the tenant rent consultation process and the views expressed by Clackmannanshire Tenants Residents Federation, and that the West Hawk site remains closed. Council will be asked prior to reopening to approve a rental figure for those properties. We don't have agreement on the paper, so I'm going to put it to the vote.
We have a roll call vote, convener.
Sure, yep.
Just go through the list as normal. Councillor Fairley,
For.
Councillor Lindsay,
For.
Councillor McCluckie,
Against.
Councillor Balsillie,
For.
Councillor Keogh, Councillor Law,
For.
Councillor Hamilton,
For.
Councillor Rennie,
Against.
Councillor McTaggart,
For.
Councillor Forson, Councillor Holden, Councillor Quinn,
For.
Councillor Harrison, Councillor Martin,
Against.
Councillor Coyne,
For.
Okay, the vote on that paper is 11 votes for and 4 against, so the paper's carried. Thank you. Okay, item 7 on the agenda is the mid-term review of Council's decision-making framework and Council responsibilities. For this paper to go forward, we need to suspend standing orders. Council has been asked to suspend standing order 20.7, which requires notice of change to standing orders to be given at a preceding meeting. The reason for this is that the review activity was originally scheduled during the summer recess, due to reported in November 2024. Unfortunately, a number of those sessions had to be rescheduled, leading to a longer elapsed time to complete the work. And as a consequence, it became apparent that some of the proposals were losing their currency. Given the improvement investments in both Council and the audit and scrutiny. Therefore, this paper has been submitted to the January meeting rather than waiting until the March meeting to ensure that recommendations made remain as current as possible. I'm going to ask you if we can suspend standing orders, noting that we need 2/3 majority for that to happen. Those content to suspend standing orders, could you do it by show of hands, please? Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you for that. I'll ask Nicky to take us through the paper. There are certain stages to this paper that we'll have to do at stage by stage to get to the end of it, so if you can bear with us while we do that.
Convener. So this paper presents the findings and proposed changes to the decision-making framework as a consequence of the recently concluded mid-term review of the Council's arrangements. Council will recall that following the local government elections in May 2022, streamlined decision-making arrangements were put in place, and these were subsequently enhanced by an additional framework of briefing fora through agreement at Council meeting in August 2022. To inform the review, a survey was prepared and a series of interviews held with the relevant chair or convener of committees and boards, as well as within internal and external audit. The report before Council today summarises the feedback received and, where appropriate, highlights any suggested improvements. The paper also seeks to realign political and managerial portfolios to sustain clarity over strategic and operational responsibilities. The next review of arrangements is scheduled to take place prior to the next local government elections in May 2027. At that time, it is anticipated that ongoing progress with RB the Future transformation work and associated target operating model are likely to be a material consideration, alongside a repeat of the evaluation of the effectiveness and ease of operation of the agreed decision-making framework elements. I'm happy to take any questions on the paper.
Okay, thanks, Nicky. Do we have any questions on the paper? Oh, Councillor Rennie.
Nicky, just on the recommendations put forward regarding Audit and Scrutiny Committee, I just wonder if there's any particular recommendation that you would be most likely to propose as the preferred one?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I'm happy to say what my view would be. Just to explain what is in the table. In the table are the suggestions that were made through the review process by those that I interviewed. Because there wasn't a clear consensus, I didn't put in an officer recommendation, but I think the narrative actually supports the view that the optimal option at this stage would be option 4. It demonstrates greater parity with the improvement works that have been taken in council as well as audit and scrutiny, so I think that would keep us nicely aligned.
Thanks, Nikki.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, it's Councillor Forson who's to move the paper. I'm going to ask that those who contribute to the debate that follows that, including yourself, Councillor Forson, in moving the paper, if they could indicate what the preference would be, both for the model and then the names for the poster to be called as well, if that's okay.
Thanks, Convener. I think as the Chief Executive has explained, this is a mid-term review of the decision-making framework within the Council. That's the first part. The second part of the paper is Council responsibilities, which are coming about from our perspective through changes to the administration group. I think it's good to review the frameworks. I think we do that on a regular basis throughout the Council and other bodies. I'll just keep it short. The administration's preferences for option 4, the kind of status quo with the enhanced briefing sessions. I think there's been a lot of development in training since the kind of review and the questions were asked of members as to what the preferences would be. I think they've started to kind of bear fruit. I think we need to let them embed and see how we progress with that for the next review. And in relation to the second part, the administration spokespeople would be in relation to the two areas. In fact, I should probably say when we were looking at the different responsibilities, I think what became apparent is through the new structures there was areas that were missing that weren't being covered off by spokespeople, and we feel that the proposals put forward address those. So the administration's preferences would be people would be spokesperson Graham Lindsay, Deputy Fiona Law, Place spokesperson Scott Harrison, Deputy Jane McTaggart, and Partnership Performance spokesperson Ellen Forson, and Deputy would be Wendy Hamilton. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lindsay to second.
Thanks. Just like again quickly to add, yeah, it's the right time to review. It's always the right time to review and refresh, but certainly at this juncture, it's the right time for us. Echo the comments that Nikki's highlighted in terms of just that realignment in terms of the political, strategic, operational priorities. Absolutely right to do. It's the way we want to work with the executive, and we know that's reciprocated. So it's the paper reads well from our perspective. Ellen's outlined that our preference is administration's option 4, so naturally seconding on that basis, and obviously support the councillor responsibilities and names attributed to those as is outlined by the council leader. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Forson, would you be able to give us that list of names for me to record?
People spokesperson Graham Lindsay. People spokesperson Graham Lindsay, Deputy Fiona Law, Place spokesperson Scott Harrison, Deputy Jane McTaggart, Partnership and Performance spokesperson Ellen Forson, and Deputy Wendy Hamilton.
Okay, thanks. The paper's now open for debate. Anybody wish to debate? No? Okay. I'm going to put the first part of this paper in, which is the options paper, to a vote, because the outcome of that vote could have an impact on the second part of it. So the proposal is that option 4 is the preferred option of the administration. Those in favour of that option, could you please show of hands? Okay, that's option 4 has been approved, 14 votes to 1. Sorry, are you abstaining or voting against, Councillor Vaughan?
Abstention.
Abstention, okay.
It's not my business what they want to do.
Okay. Okay, so apologies, colleagues. I'm just seeking clarification from others in the chamber. We've been given names put forward by the administration for this post, and at this stage, no other names have come forward from anybody. Is anybody intending to put any other names forward for any of those posts? Okay, thanks for that. On that basis, are we happy to approve the paper, or the bit that's left of the paper, with the names that you put forward?
No.
No. Okay. Those.
The word that if you word it a different way, I can abstain with you.
So I'm not going to negotiate with the wording at this stage, this comes along. So, those in favour, please show. Okay, and those against? Those abstaining? 1 abstention. Okay, thank you. The paper's been carried. We're going to take a 10-minute comfort break, colleagues. We come back at 25 to. 2024. Lindsay's going to take us through that.
Thank you and good morning, Council. So this report sets out the draft annual accounts for 23-24. Some of the highlights from the report are the outturn in the year on the general fund revenue budget was positive and returned an underspend of 2.8 million before earmarking of reserves. As a result of the planned use of reserves and a favourable outturn position, general reserves have increased by 6.2 million to 27.1 million. And of this amount, 23.3 are earmarked for spend in future years, and the details are given in paragraph 3.6 of the report. This leaves uncommitted reserves at a level of 3.8 million, which is 2.4% of the budgeted net expenditure, and this is above the 2% approved minimum level set by the Council. The housing revenue account also outturned a surplus of 4.7 million, which was 0.9 million greater than that budgeted. The surplus, along with the planned use of reserves, resulted in a reduction of 7.3 million in reserves, which reduced the closing reserves balance to 1.4 million. This includes 0.4 million of committed reserves, leaving a balance of 0.9 million uncommitted, which equates to the approved minimum level of 4% for the housing revenue account. In capital expenditure across both the general fund and the HRA, 28.9 million was expended on capital assets. This was 19.9 million less than budgeted. 14.1 of the total spend was on the general fund and 14.8 was on the HRA. This was funded by grants and contributions of 12.6 million, revenue funding of 10.8 million and borrowing of 5.5 million. The Council also notes two provisions. They amount to 190,000 and they include the long-standing provision for insurance, which was increased to 91,000, and a new provision for 72,000 for voluntary severance. As per last year, there are 4 contingent liabilities are included within the accounts, and these are items where there is a potential liability, but this will only be confirmed or otherwise by uncertain future events not entirely within the control of the Council. The pensions asset is a significant asset on the balance sheet, and a movement this year is due to the annual valuation of the net asset by the Council's actuary. The valuation is reduced by 13.8 million, but still remains a positive position. The reason for this decrease is mainly due to an increase in the discount rate and asset returns. Council is asked to consider the 23-24 draft annual accounts and approve their submission to the external auditors for audit. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Do we have any questions? Councillor Coyne?
Thanks. Just one, actually. Is this this is the last but one time that we will see these papers before they're finally achieved? They're going to go from here to Deloitte's and then come back to us at some later stage for approval? Fine, in that case, I have no questions at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rennie?
Yeah, thanks very much, Lindsay. Again, really comprehensive. It was just a couple of small questions, just for me to understand a wee bit better, I think. In terms of the capital expenditure and financing, it was mentioned there that there was 19 million underspent. Is that carrying forward to be used in the next financial year? Or has that been kind of into the ether, or will that be carried forward?
So some of the underspend is carried forward, and that's detailed within the 24-25 approved budget for both the general fund and the HRA, and then in the outturn reports through the year. So it would depend if there's projects that have slipped due to timing, then that is when we'll likely carry forward the budget. But if there's projects that have underspent the allocated budget, we wouldn't carry that forward.
Okay. And the other one just really is for me to understand. I mean, I saw the mention of the 12 million on service concessions, and I realise that relates back to the 2022 Treasury paper, where we had sort of looked at different planning in terms of creating those service concessions. So I just wanted to understand, looking at it, it seemed to be that we would have a benefit from past expenditure that we'd had on previous loans, so PFI loans particularly, that we would benefit from some past expenditure on that, where it would be brought into the budget. And then in future years, so we would pay off the the person who built the properties by the end of 30 years, but because of the change in accounting practice, we would then move on to another 50 years where that money could then sort of be paid off over that in an accountancy way. So it's not cash, it's like, so the cash to the person that built the properties is exactly the same, but in an accounting term, it's like almost like a provision over the next 50 years. So I was just wondering if that is correct, if I've got the right picture on that. I couldn't see the journal entries in my head, but it was just if that's the kind of right way. And if that's the case, are we likely to have increased expenditure in future years after that period?
Thank you. Yes, you are correct in your description there of what it is. There's a separation between the contract we have for the PPP schools and the payments made to the contractor. There is no change to that. It is how we account for it through our loans fund accounting treatment. And that was to realign the asset life of the schools in terms of the asset life that the schools have rather than the length of the contract. So that's how we've made the change. And that has given us a benefit, and most of the 12 million benefit is from past benefit. And we have an annual benefit for the next few years. And then that turns into just our normal increased costs in terms of our loans fund. So you're correct in your interpretation of that.
Thank goodness, I was really worried. I was looking at it at like 11 o'clock last night and thought maybe not, but so I'm glad of that. But do we have a plan for how to spend the 12 million that's been recovered from that?
So part of the 12 million was used to support the 24-25 budget. So around about 6 million of that was used. So there is 5.9 that still remains in general reserves as a committed reserve, but not definite plans to spend that at the moment. But as you'll remember from the briefings, we have been looking at that in terms of supporting 25-26 budget. And we've also, as part of that, we look towards our transformation programme. So we're recognising, the council's recognising that funds will need to be available to fund that transformation to change our service delivery methods. And the 12 million was initially aligned to that transformation programme.
Thanks very much. No more questions from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? No? Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Councillor Forson to move the paper.
Yeah, I'm proposing the Council's draft annual accounts for 23-24, which have been prepared in compliance with the relevant codes of practice and provides a detailed overview of the Council's financial position at the close of the financial year. Sets out the key factors that have shaped our finances and, by extension, the services that we are able to provide to our communities. The preparation of these accounts is not just a statutory requirement, it's also a part of our ongoing commitment to transparency and sound financial management. The financial statements aim to give a true and fair view of the Council's financial position, ensuring that we remain accountable to our residents and stakeholders. This process also includes group financial statements where we account for material interests in subsidiaries, joint ventures and associated entities. So I'm particularly pleased to note that the financial results for 23-24 are positive, providing a solid foundation as we navigate the challenges of the coming years. And despite the ongoing pressures from reduced resources and the broader economic context, the Council has successfully delivered services within budget, achieving a high percentage of its approved savings targets. However, as outlined within the paper, there remain considerable pressures ahead, particularly in the context of rising inflation and the ongoing cost of living crisis. These will continue to require careful management and ongoing adjustments to ensure that we can continue to provide services to our communities. I'd like to finish by thanking Lindsay and the team for the considerable work that goes into preparing the accounts, and I ask Council to approve the recommendations which allow us to move forward with the next steps in the audit process. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lindsay to second.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I agree. The accounts paint a really clear picture of the Council's financial position and context. The results for the year are particularly positive, with a surplus being achieved within the General Fund, allowing the Council's uncommitted reserves to remain in excess of the 2% budgeted net expenditure. Now, despite the rising pressures across the business and the current financial circumstances, as has been outlined in terms of high inflation, cost of living, but also the demand for services. And again, we need to re-emphasise that, and will do over the coming months as we prepare a new budget. The demand for services continues to increase, despite the current financial context that we find ourselves within, particularly in Clackmannanshire. Now, services have worked incredibly hard to manage their spend within their budgets, that's clear, and that's to ensure the council is able to operate within its means. However, as the council leaders already outlined, we need to recognise the scale of the challenge ahead of us. We absolutely do recognise that, and our attention is very much focused on the forthcoming budget setting process. I think, just to add that, our thanks to Lindsay and the team. There's a lot of work that goes into preparing these accounts, but also keeping an eye on future budgets as well, particularly at the moment, and leading that budget process with us. So just to pass our thanks to the officers for preparing these accounts, and happy to approve the paper. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. The paper's open for further debate. Anyone wish to debate the paper? Councillor Rennie?
Yeah, just to add, as Chair of Audit and Scrutiny, just to add the thanks to Lindsay for the substantial work that goes into preparing the document and all the background that goes to that as well. I realise it's not easy, but also just a note that we'd mentioned before at committee, just as Chair of Audit and Scrutiny, it would be great if the accounts could come at some point to Audit and Scrutiny, preferably before, but being finally approved. But we asked at the last Audit and Scrutiny meeting, we asked the auditors if that's common practice in other councils, and they confirmed that it was. So I think it'd be helpful if we could do that. So it's just a point to make on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other contributions to the debate? Councillor Forson, do you want an opportunity to sum up? No. Okay, so the paper's asking us to approve the submission of the draft annual accounts for audit to the council's external auditors, and to note that the audited annual accounts will be presented to council following conclusion of the audit. I'm happy to approve. Thank you. Item 9 is the future update asset strategy. Nicky's going to take us through that paper.
Thank you, Convener. So this is the Council's regular update on progress with the development and implementation of the Be the Future Target operating model and the associated transformation programme. The report follows the standard layout and forward plan previously agreed by Council. Progress with work on the top 3 priority themes is set out, and you'll recall that those 3 themes are digital and data transformation, workforce strategy and asset strategy. Asset strategy in particular is covered in more detail in line with the scheduled forward plan update. The key areas highlighted in the paper are the significant amount of work in respect of digital and data transformation, including cybersecurity, modernising our work practices and the service user environments with more digital services either in development or being rolled out. And good progress is also being made with the development of the invitation to tender for the social work IT system. A detailed update was recently presented to the Audit and Scrutiny Committee on progress with the interim workforce strategy, with a range of development opportunities and supports, detailing how they're being rolled out. The balance of the paper sets out the parameters, draft principles and timescales for the development of the Council's asset management strategy. The commentary also sets out information regarding the refresh of the discrete but inherently related learning estate strategy. I'm happy to take any questions on the paper.
Okay, thanks, Nicky. Do we have any questions on the paper? Councillor Coyne?
Can we go to page 268, 3.7.5? It's talking in there about the first couple of sentences, aiming to meet the Scottish Government's net zero targets by 2045, carbon neutrality, etc. First question, what are the penalties 20 years ahead for failing to meet those targets?
I'm looking at Kevin, but I think I know the answer to this. At this point, there are not any sanctions. It's an interesting one because in this chamber and the previous council chambers, we've been asked the question in different forms many times. We've always expected at some point sanctions would come around our carbon accounting and so on. It's not happened yet. but we need to be aware that that is a potential.
Okay, so there's a risk that there will be some in the future. We can accept that. We don't know what they are, and it's a very long time ahead. But here in the present day, I wonder if we are conducting any kind of part of the operation in order to achieve these targets, which brings no immediate benefit, financial or socially, to what we do. In fact, it's costing us money or time. And I would hope that we could avoid doing anything like that in order to meet someone else's targets that are way in the future, that we prejudice our today. That's my concern.
I'll start off responding to that. I'll let Kevin add to what I say if he wants to. I mean, obviously councils have declared a climate emergency and also has the Climate Change Strategy Board. One of the things in an earlier paper on this agenda was actually to refocus the work of that board, particularly on the specific actions that we need to deliver in line with that strategy. And that is our local version of the targets we aspire to take us on that journey towards meeting net zero. Is there anything else you want to add, Kevin?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Coyne. The only other aspect I would probably add to what the Chief Executive is given there is, whilst there are no sanctions on us, we know just in terms of recent storms and the impact of climate change, that actually taking measures to try and help reduce that may be more cost effective in the long term, and I appreciate that's very much in the long term, but also some of the measures that we will be looking as part of our climate change strategy is to try and reduce things around about our energy costs, etc., and make them more affordable going into the future. So whilst I take the premise of the point that you're making, I think there are also benefits from making sure that we take cognizance of some of these agenda items on climate change.
Fine, thanks. I mean, any strategy can be revisited at any time that we like. No, really, the question I was asking, I take what you say about saving energy costs. Of course, that's sensible. Well, and it's virtue signalling that worries me in this kind of arena. And I wouldn't want this council to be wasting its time and money virtue signalling for no gain. That's all. Did you understand that?
I think you raise a really interesting point, Councillor, and we've been having a not dissimilar conversation with the administration about looking at, well, it would apply to any strategy. It's not just the climate change strategy, but when the council is setting out its approach, we need to be reflecting our local operating environment. And I know that sounds like, yes, of course we do, but actually more than ever, given how challenging the operating environment is, be it environmental, financial, etc. So I've actually called pause on a few strategies recently so that we can have more consideration of what are the actions that we should be taking that will deliver the greatest benefit and are actually achievable and deliverable given some of the resourcing constraints we've got. So I think it's a very good question and it's something that we're becoming very aware of.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thanks, Nikki. Councillor Fortune to move the paper.
Thanks, Convener. I'm pleased to propose the latest update on the Council's future target operating model and associated transformation programme. The paper outlines the key progress on several priority themes, with a particular focus on the asset management strategy and its ongoing development. As you will be aware, the Be the Future initiative is our shared commitment to transforming how we operate, deliver services and manage our resources to better serve the people of Clackmannanshire. So the paper updates on the progress we've made in relation to the three priority themes: digital and data transformation, the workforce strategy, and of course, as I've said, the asset management strategy. So in terms of the asset management strategy, we're moving forward with the development of a comprehensive and sustainable framework to manage all of the Council's assets effectively. This strategy is a crucial element of our broader transformation, ensuring that we are using our resources to their full potential and aligning them with the changing demands of our community. I draw the attention of Council to the key recommendations from the paper that we've been asked to note, which is the progress in the asset management strategy and its timeline, the learning and estate strategy, which will be developed in parallel with the asset management strategy, but it will obviously stand on its own. And the underlying principles that will shape the asset management strategy, ensuring its alignment with our strategic goals and future needs. So in terms of the digital transformation, we're making excellent progress. The migration to Microsoft 365 continues to be rolled out successfully, with the majority of corporate users and elected members now being transitioned. I hope that's the case and everyone's finding the new system workable. We've also made notable advancements in improving our digital services with new initiatives such as the online school enrolment and fuel poverty applications going live in the coming months. And these are just a few examples of how we are embracing digital transformation to enhance service delivery for our communities. The workforce strategy is also advancing as planned, with rollout of leadership development programmes, a comprehensive staff survey and key actions in place to ensure we have the right people in the right roles with the right skills to meet the future demands of our services. So turning to the asset management strategy as outlined in the paper, the strategy will be developed in stages and will encompass all of our assets, corporate, commercial, fleet and community assets. This strategic approach will allow us to ensure that our asset base is sustainable, fit for purpose and aligned with the long-term needs of our communities. The asset management strategy will also closely align with the learning estate strategy, which will undergo a review and an update. And as we consider our learning estate, we're committed to improving outcomes for our communities by ensuring that our schools and other educational facilities meet the needs of the 21st century, but also contribute to the broader goals of sustainable and inclusive growth. The key principles that will underpin the asset management strategy include the sustainable management of our assets, ensuring that we reduce costs, improve performance and enhance service delivery, the review of surplus assets to optimise returns and reduce unnecessary expenditure, and the incorporation of carbon reduction and net zero principles, and that's in line with their commitment to environmental sustainability. Also within there is the promotion of community asset transfers, ensuring that assets serve the needs of the communities in an inclusive and transparent manner. So we're working towards several milestones in the development of this strategy, including securing additional resources by Q1 of 2025 and finalising the community asset transfer policy by April 2025, and all going well, completing the draft asset management strategy by August 2025. So I look forward to continued support across the Chamber as we move forward with these ambitious and transformative proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McTaggart, say a second.
Sorry, Chair, I'll just formally second that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The paper is now open for debate. Anyone wish to debate the paper? Oh, sorry, Councillor Lindsay.
So, right, just to briefly add, I don't think there's a huge amount to add. I think the paper speaks for itself, and I think Ellen really clearly outlined the updates that have been made. But I think the difference between maybe the previous papers and this paper in terms of just pulling out that obviously there's been a lot of work that's been undertaken and rolled out in terms of the digital transformation, ongoing work around the social work IT system, the school enrolment, which is really positive, amongst other areas as well. I'm sure we'll touch on the school enrolments one in a future paper as well. But a huge amount of work now being undertaken in terms of the asset management strategy and how that will clearly align to the learning estate strategy, of which obviously I'll have a lot to do with, I would hope, and certainly in my role as a people spokesperson with education remit as well. So just really just to reinforce that point that that strategy will be a standalone strategy, but pleased that it will run through and be closely aligned to the asset management strategy. So a huge amount of work going on, good update, welcome the paper, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any others? So the paper is just asking us to note 2.1 to 2.4. We can tend to note. Okay, thank you. Item 10 is the Wellbeing Hub and Lockheed School project update. Robbie's going to take us through that, thank you.
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, councillors. I'm pleased to present this paper, which provides an update on the Wellbeing Hub and Lockheed School project. The report outlines the progress on the project and recommends that the Council approves an up to amount of £2.6 million to complete a series of enabling works to help improve programme timescales. The £2.6 million is included in the capital plan and is not an additional ask from Council. The enabling works include site preparation, contract mobilisation, power cable diversion, drainage works, earthworks and piling as detailed in paragraph 3.11. The primary risk of proceeding with enabling works is that if Council decided not to proceed with the full construction programme, the costs could be incurred. However, it is worth noting that in this event, much of the cost would be mitigated as the land preparation would have value for future development. Enabling works would only proceed once the legal contracts, building warrants and planning permissions are in place. And I'm pleased to share with Council that planning approval was granted with conditions at the Planning Committee last week. This is another major milestone achieved for the project. In conclusion, the Council is being asked to approve the up to contract amount for early works to allow the project team to commence contract finalisation and other associated permissions for the works with the view of getting on site as quickly as possible. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Okay, thanks, Robbie. It's now open to questions. Councillor Harrison.
Thanks for that, Robbie. Yes, it's, any estimations as to timescales? So if we approve this enabling works, we're obviously looking to do this to get the programme back on track. It's due to the planning delays. Any indication of what we would see time-wise and be able to pull back into the...
Thanks, Councillor Harrison. So the enabling works contract, we're still detailing out the full length of that. They're working through that just now because we're obviously waiting for Council approval before proceeding, but we're looking in the region of about 21 weeks for that programme of works. That's essentially 21 weeks that we would lose if we don't go ahead, because during that period of time we'll be finalising the full contract, the full business case for financial close to bring back to Council for final decision for the full construction programme. If we were not to proceed, then all that work will continue, but there will be no construction work on site or early works on site to ready the site so that we can move quickly. We would also look to have an overlap as well in the construction programme, which would buy us another kind of 2 or 3 weeks, and we're working pretty hard with Hub East Central to support us with that, and their Tier 1 contractor Robertsons to look at as many ways in which we can mitigate time as much as possible, because we appreciate that we want to get Lockheed School ready, and we want to get the Wellbeing Hub and public leisure and wellbeing and swimming facilities back to the public as quickly as possible.
Okay, Councillor Holden, to be followed by Councillor Coyne.
Can you just confirm, so the formal contract itself is not complete? Is that correct? You said that the contract has been delayed and subject to our deliberations today, but the contract itself, is that contingent upon just our agreement, or are there elements to the contract that will be completed?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we will not move forward with that until there's approval from Council for that spend. So we'll work on the contracts after approval if we get that. We are also having ongoing conversations with the planning authority. There are conditions in the planning application. We need to make sure that they are covered off. None of those, there's only a small amount of those that are conditioned to be done before we commence any works or any on the site. The rest are predominantly before the building is operational, and we can detail those out if required. The other area is around building warrants. So again, we're in conversations with the planning authority to make sure we have everything in place. The main area that would require that would be the piling. That's in the second phase of any enabling works. So again, we have time to ensure that we can get the building warrants in place, and we would not proceed with any works to do with piling unless we have that in place.
Well, the report says that the risk, which is outlined in 3.10, it's about, not approving Hubco Stage 2 submission on the full business case, which are outlined in paragraphs 3.4 and 3.5. The timescales for which are May 25 and June 25. Why bring it now? Why not wait until we've got all of that done and ready, and we're at the point where we can approve that, rather than approving a contract we can't see and taking even some element of risk at the moment? Why not wait? It's only a matter of weeks. What difference is that going to make? Presumably, if it's a 4-week, that's May, so a 12-week wait. Does that correspond to a 12-week further delay to enabling works? But
I'm just not sure why take the risk when it's quite a short timescale between now and the production of the stage 2 submission.
Thanks for the question. I mean, I think with any of these things, there's always a risk. We could wait, and that would be council's decision to not go ahead with enabling works and wait and work through final contract finalisation, the full business case, bring that back as quick as we can. There is a lot of detail in that, and the legal contracts and the detail to get to that design and build contract. A lot of detail needs to go into that, a lot of back and forth. And we're aiming for those dates. They could take longer, but what the enabling works contract will allow us is to be working away on site, getting the site prepared while we're in the background working on that. It mitigates any further delays. It mitigates any further lengthened delays through what is going to be a complex process, as it should be. We need to make sure we get it right, make sure the council's protected. So that's why we proposed this, because it will buy us back time. It will make sure that we're moving as quickly as we possibly can.
The next question is around the timescales that were outlined in the report for Lochie Schools. This is 3.9. It talks about Lochie School being ready to move to the new school in 2027. I don't see a date there because it talks about the wellbeing hub, and then it talks about Lochie School, and it talks about the new school moving on that date. What is still at this point in time? Presumably, if you get approval today for this, then I think you said you'd say something like 21 weeks. So, what's the projected end point? When are we going to have people being able to go into the centre, the wellbeing hub?
That's a question, and it's a good question. Obviously, we are working with Hubby Centres now to finalise that programme. There's a lot of detail that needs to go into that. The projected construction time period is 101 weeks. So that would take us through to, in terms of, for the Wellbeing Hub, we're looking at May 2027 and June 2027 for Lochies. However, we've still to get that final programme from Robertson's. Obviously, we're going through that detail at the moment. These are projected timescales, but we are very much pushing them to better that. I'm very much pushing them to make sure that we're no later than that, particularly for Lochie's school, because we need to have the school ready for getting in August, before the August intake. However, as I say, the construction industry at the moment is a challenging place. And the supply chain, in terms of timescales, is challenging. So we're working really closely with Robertson Construction and Hubby Central to mitigate that, to get a really detailed programme so that we can give actual dates to council when we come back to full business case. That's why we caveat all of this as they are very much projected dates at this stage. And it also depends how quickly we can get contracts in place for enabling works if approved, because all of that eats into the time as well. So that's why I don't want to commit to any dates.
Final question relates to that point you were just making there, which was about I mean, I'm always conscious that if you put a paper up saying we've got £2.6 million to spend, and everybody sees it, and I'm surprised it wasn't a blue paper, just in terms of the final sum. You know, if my wife tells me she's got £100, then I can, you know, in her pocket, then I can stay out all night. If she tells me she's got £50, then we're only going to go for lunch. I just wonder what impact that has on the negotiations in terms of the contracts, because they're aware there's a sum at the end, quite a considerable one. And whether that would dictate, I don't know. I mean, I'm naive, I've not been in the construction industry, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I just think if somebody's aware of the figures there, does that not kind of jeopardise a wee bit your ability to negotiate? It's, you know, it's kind of limiting your ability to do that.
It's a good question, and it's a challenge, I think, for all local authorities, because we need to be open and transparent about our costs, but at the same time we are working with the private sector in terms of then developing, and that is really the role of Hubby Central and the hub is to manage those costs, to make sure we're getting value for money. That's why they were set up. Their job is to make sure there isn't hidden costs or things added, and they aren't just working to an up-to figure. However, in order to mitigate that even further, and that's not to say we don't have trust in that process, but to make sure the council is getting absolute value for money, we've also contracted Thomas and Addison, who you know were working for us as project managers, to do an additional role as cost advisors. So they're also checking all of the costs to make sure they're accurate based on national and global figures, so that we are getting absolute value for money. So we've almost got a belt and braces approach, so they can't just work to an up-to figure, which, as you say, can happen, and it's a challenge for local authorities, but we're making sure that we're all over the detail on that in terms of costs, and that's why we've taken that approach.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coyne, to be followed by Councillor McCluckie.
Thanks very much. Robbie, you have answered my question in your briefing at the beginning about the risk element of the 2.6 million. But you've outlined the case for spending it. You know, and obviously there are many benefits from that. Just to balance up the scales, as it were, can we look at what is the risk that the works that are done before you get to the approval point in the future would be recoverable or reusable elsewhere? You did say that some of the works could be used for future development. So just to give us an idea of what the risk is, playing devil's advocate for a moment, how much could we guarantee would have a future use?
Thanks for the question. We're still getting the individual packages costed as per the question. We need to make sure what they're proposing is value for money and that it's been properly tested. The main works around the rediversion of overhead power lines, for example, we would want to do that for any future development, so that cost is mitigated. The surface water drainage diversion, which is another big piece of work in there, again, is an area that it runs right down the middle of that site. For any future development, you would want to divert that and change that. So again, those costs are mitigated. And then site strip and getting the site prepared, all of those costs, again, for any future development, whether it was the council or others. The main one that would be a loss would be the piling, but that's the second phase of the works, and that's also subject to building warrant. We'll be much closer by the point of signing that off to know that we have full business case ready, costs of an affordable project, everything there. So again, we've mitigated the risk and made the riskiest one the last piece of work to be done, but it is still a risk, and we're obviously asking council to take that decision today.
So would I be right in taking away from that roughly half of the expenditure could be repurposed?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption.
Is that you, Councillor Coyne?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Councillor McCluckie, yours has been...
It's going to be the same question in terms of the risk of mitigation, how we would recover it.
Okay. Councillor Harrison, to be followed by Councillor McTaggart.
Thanks. Robbie, probably two quick ones. Enabling works on a project is that unusual that would happen? And sorry, I'll just ask the second one. And can you just clarify the QS situation for us? I think it'd be quite good to get that level of comfort on costs of how what the project team are taking. Flashing the green a minute. I'll start again. Just can you explain the QS situation, what the project has done with the QSs, just to make sure that we are absolutely on top of any costs coming in, just so there's a level of comfort there.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Harrison. So to answer the first question, it is in terms of enabling works is fairly commonplace for projects of this scale. It was before my time, but I understand that Tullibody South Campus had an enabling works package before going on to full construction. I can be corrected if I'm wrong with that one, but I think that's correct. And certainly I've seen that in a number of projects across the country, so it's not uncommon. And what it does do is like you say, it mitigates a lot of the time restraints because you can get a load of work done behind the scenes, the kind of legal side, warrants, planning, everything else, whilst getting on site and getting the site ready for development. The second question, sorry, just remembered what it was. So in terms of the QS part of it, so obviously within the council, as we know, we've got limited resources, but we are fairly stretched in terms of resources, and certainly along the lines of something like QS, it's not something you want to leave to chance. It's not my background as a quantity surveyor, so as much as I can check figures, we need that backed up. As I say, Hub East Central have been procured as the procurement vehicle to ensure that we get affordable project and the costs are assured. However, we wanted, and I think at the request of council, to ensure that we were double checking everything, and we took the decision and we costed that up in terms of a risk analysis to appoint Thomas and Allen in an additional function on a short-term contract. So we still have project management through them, but they're a global project management firm and can test the market across the UK and across the world. So it's to have that ability to be able to look at all these different projects, look at the market, what's coming up, where the lot of them are adding in risk around national insurance, costs have gone up, all of these things are getting added on by the supply chain. And the worst case is they all add it on, and then the main contractor adds it on, and so on and so forth. And we're seeing that across the board. TNA's role in this will be to check and challenge that and work with check and challenge Hubby Central, check and challenge Robertson's, the subcontractors, to make sure that we aren't getting hit by all of these extra costs which continue to be added on to the construction industry. And it is a challenging place at the moment, and I don't think we would want to leave ourselves exposed or sign off on any contracts without doing that due diligence.
Thank you, Councillor McTaggart.
Thanks, Convener. Hi, Robbie. If this was not to be approved today, is there a risk that it would delay the project further? And is there a risk that it could come in at higher cost than if we do it now? Thanks, Robbie.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yes and yes, I think it's the simple answer to that. I think the way the market is in construction, the costs never go down, they only ever go up. I think we've seen that over the last 5 to 10 years, particularly in the last 5 years since COVID. So yes, there's a risk. There's a definite risk that costs will continue to increase as we move towards full business case. However, we would still probably be working to those same programmes. So in the spirit of transparency, the timeline to get to full business case wouldn't necessarily change, but getting us onto site to do the works would be much quicker. So the main risk is around time. It's around delivering the project on time and not losing any more time at the tail end. And the risk, I guess, if we don't proceed, is we're looking into this autumn, winter potentially for completion, which is what we want to avoid. Ideally, we want to get this open to the public for the summertime. That'd be also from a revenue point of view, big incomes generator, and for the public point of view, they want to get these facilities open and enjoy them, particularly in the summer months. And from a Lockheed's perspective, it's getting them in ahead of a full term rather than having to move mid-term.
Thank you. Councillor Hall, did you want back another question?
Just 2 or 3 cheeky ones. I just wanted to clarify things. It's important to ask them. You maybe not quite get it when I'm getting, well, you probably all actually. But anyway, the total area, the whole project, all the enabling work, what's the total area of that? If you don't know today, it's fine. I can get an answer some other time. But I'm just curious. But the total area with the school and all of the wellbeing hub, what is it?
The entire site is 6.5 hectares.
6.5 hectares. Oops. And is that larger? Sorry.
Is that larger or smaller than the legible site?
Significantly larger.
Do you care to tell us?
You can tell I couldn't remember the exact figure for how size the legible was, but I can get that figure to you. My recollection, it was about 1 hectare, but I'll need to double check that.
Right. My knowledge of hectares extends only to the Mungo and Jerry song, and I'm not quite sure about what size that is, but is a hectare big? I mean, what is that?
The risk of sounding like Donald Trump, it's really big.
It's a square kilometre.
Okay, and my final question was around the enabling works in terms of the cost. You'll know why I'm asking, so I've asked this English the 2 questions. So, would there have been such extensive enabling, given if this hectare is very big, but the cost of enabling works at the former site, which was the former preferred site, which was eligible, would the enabling works have been up to the tune of 2.6 million there?
Obviously, the decision on the site was taken at council a number of years ago. The facilities mix for the town centre or Alloa West were exactly the same. That's what was approved at council. So it would have been, in terms of construction costs, it wouldn't have been any different. The difference would have been we wouldn't have been able to fit Lockheed's or any outdoor space on that site. So it would have been a completely different proposition. But in terms of enabling works, ultimately, I can't give you a figure because we're not comparing like for like, but you would be in the same region in terms of costs, and they would still. The key thing is they're consumed within the overall capital costs for the project. These are not additional costs. We're not coming to council to ask for more money. This has already been costed. All we're doing is asking for some of that front end to get moving on the site.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you, Robbie. Councillor Harrison to move the paper.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Before I talk about the paper, I actually want to share some pretty sad news with everybody. Ben McGinley, one of the team who was supporting the development of the Wellbeing Hub in Lochie School, passed away suddenly after a very short illness recently. Ben was a principal teacher at Alva Academy before he moved to the centre, where he had been leading on work on the learning estate while also supporting the Lochie School development. Ben's passing has had a huge impact on his colleagues within the council. He was a well-liked friend and colleague. Ben sadly leaves behind his wife and 3 young children, and I'm sure I speak for everybody today in the chamber when I say that all of our thoughts and prayers are with them at this very sad time. Moving on to the paper, last Thursday the planning application for the Wellbeing Hub in Lochie School was heard by the planning committee, and the application was passed by the committee with conditions to be met.
About 2 minutes ago.
Too loud, Dennis?
Yes.
Never been. Okay. This is a huge milestone to reach for the project, one that has been rightly scrutinised in depth by Council, Planning Committee and the general public. The size, scale and importance of this project has seen it generate lots of interest from across Clackmannanshire and beyond. And all points of view have been taken into account, both positive and negative, to get to this point. And I hear often that people have not been listened to. I can assure anybody who has had this project, whether around this chamber or general public, the points of view have been listened to. It may not be the outcome they wanted, have been listened to. So now the plans have been passed, it is important that we start to move the project along to the build phase. These enabling works will help to mitigate some of the delays encountered so far, primarily driven by delays in the planning consent, delays for the right reasons due to requests for further detailed information.
Sorry, Scott, could we try third time look at swap again?
It's not a mics, it's hand.
That one's definitely working, so this is working.
Yeah, move the mic away, let the mic do the work. You're an excellent. You did it again.
Hopefully I can pick up where I left and I've not lost my place. So, the full business case will be coming to Council in June this year, and if we wait until then, we will be delaying the project even further. The enabling works as listed in the paper will also allow the project to mitigate against potential supply chain issues. I have to stress that this is not additional funding, it is merely an early use of already agreed budget. Also, as outlined in the paper, there is a risk to approving these works if the full business case is not approved. That risk is mitigated by the fact that if that was the case, then the land is already prepared for development for use, whether that be by the council or a third party. In short, I believe that the benefits of approving this paper and these enabling works far outweigh the risks. So happy to move the paper. And apologies for the Norman Collier impressions.
Thank you. Councillor Lindsay to second.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I think the microphone could sense the excitement around this project from Councillor Hanson. But no, I support the paper. I think I welcome the questions as well. I think it's important that there's a reason that, from the outset we asked for, regular updates, and it's come over the last couple of years. It's come every single council meeting. So I think and that might change.